Good evening. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Winchendon Board of Selectmen. It is Monday, September 26th, 2022 at 6:33 p.m. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who is audio or video recording? Raise your hand and signify. And for the record, I see none. Thank you. Selectmen's comments and announcements. Mrs. Salter?
None at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ward?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Mrs. Lapointe?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Anderson?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. And I have nothing at this time. Moving on, we do have a public hearing this evening. Mr. Ward, may I call on you?
Chair,
Yes.
are you skipping through the public comments and announcements? I'm going right to the...
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you. Trying to make up those
She's
few
on a
minutes.
mission, that lady.
Public comments and announcements. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who would like to come before the board?
No.
Mr. Ford?
Edward Ford Jr. I believe my mailing address is now 237 Central Street, or the Community Action Center. One of my concerns that would be brought before the board was BOLOs for our local police office. These are little remote control-like devices that will wrap up an assailant before they get to the police officer. As we all know, pepper spray, when you spray somebody with pepper spray, they cough, they snort, they wheeze. You got bacteria from their mouth and face and tears all over the back of the police car. If you use a taser, the taser, sometimes you'll lose your bowels if you're having a heart problem.
So your point is you're recommending that the police department consider an alternative?
Oh, yes.
All right.
And
Thank you. If you have any information, maybe get it to the town manager, and we'll disseminate it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, public comment or announcement? All right. Now, public hearings. We have National Grid and Verizon poll petitions. Mr. Ward, thank you.
The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Town of Winchendon, September 15, 2022. In conformity with the requirements of Section 22 of Chapter 166 of the General Laws, you are hereby notified that a public hearing is scheduled to be held by the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Winchendon, Massachusetts, on the 26th day of September at 6:30 p.m. in the second floor auditorium of the Winchendon Town Hall, 109 Front Street, upon the petition of Massachusetts Electric Company, doing business as National Grid and Verizon New England, Inc., requesting permission to locate poles, wires, and fixtures, including the necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures along and across the following public ways. Hitchcock Road, National Grid to install 3 joint-owned poles on Hitchcock Road, beginning at a point approximately 674 feet east of the center line of the intersection of Alger Street and Hitchcock Road, and continuing approximately 220 feet in an east direction. Install 3 new joint-owned poles along Hitchcock Road for multiple new residential homes being built. Hitchcock Road, National Grid to install 4 joint-owned poles on Hitchcock Road, beginning at a point approximately 140 feet east of the center line of the intersection of Doyle Avenue and Hitchcock Road, and continuing approximately 442 feet in an east direction. Install 4 new joint-owned poles along Hitchcock Road for multiple new residential homes being built. Doyle Avenue, National Grid to install 7 joint-owned poles on Doyle Avenue, beginning at a point approximately 43 feet north of the center line of the intersection of Doyle Avenue and Hitchcock Road, and continuing approximately 910 feet in a north direction. install 7 new joint-owned poles along Doyle Avenue for multiple new residential homes being built. Location approximately as shown on plan attached. Wherefore, it prays that after due notice and hearing as provided by law, it be granted a location for and permission to erect and maintain poles and wires, together with such sustaining and protecting fixtures as it may find necessary. Said poles to be erected substantially in accordance with the plan filed herewith marked Hitchcock Road and Doyle Road, Winchendon, Massachusetts. Plan number 30571955, dated August 3rd, 2022. Also for permission to lay and maintain underground laterals, cables, and wires in the above or intersecting public ways for the purpose of making connection with such poles and buildings as each of said petitioners may desire for distributing purposes. Your petitioner agrees to reserve space for 1 cross arm at a suitable point on each of said poles for the fire, police, telephone, and telegraph signal wires belonging to the municipality and used by it exclusively for municipal purposes. Any comments, questions, or concerns can be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen prior to the meeting by mailing the Selectmen at 109 Central Front Street, Department 1, Winchendon, Mass. 01475, by email at ldaigle@townofwinchendon.com, or by calling the office at 978-297-0085, signed Linda Daigle, Executive Assistant for the Winchendon Board of Selectmen.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
I move to open the poll petition public hearings for Hitchcock Road and Doyle Ave.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair will vote aye. And is there someone from National Grid here this evening? Good evening. If you would, and for the record, state your name, please, into the mic.
Good. What'd you say? State your name.
Yes.
I'm Robert Williams.
And you're with National Grid?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Fairly straightforward. We have the map in front of us. We have a letter from Director of DPW, Mr. Croto, saying he's reviewed the petition and he finds it acceptable. Any questions for the gentleman? Questions, comments? Mrs. Anderson?
I think my only question is trees. Do you intend to have to remove any trees that are there in order to put up the poles?
I think currently there's just
I'm sorry, a little closer to the mic.
Currently there is tree trimming planned for the installation of the pole lines. I'm not involved with the forestry and their work, so I don't know what they plan on removing or just trimming. I did choose the locations for the poles, and we went out of our way to try to stay away from very heavily foliage area with a lot of trees. So I would say it looks to me like it's just a little bit of tree trimming, not too much tree removal.
Not too much?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really speak to what they're gonna do, but I know when I went out there, I went out there to avoid.
I can answer this. Prior to National Grid being able to take out the trees, it has to be approved by the tree warden, which is myself. I have a meeting this Friday with Brandy, who's in charge of the tree department for National Grid, and I can have that conversation with her. They're gonna take out as little as possible.
What does that tell me today?
They're gonna take out what's necessary to bring power down that road in order to build houses. That road is overgrown, it's a liability for the town, and this is gonna cost us nothing to have these trees cut back to an acceptable level for the power to go in.
I think that my concern is more with older trees, established trees, that I really don't want them removed. And I think at some point, this should be an obligation that, you know, a younger tree that hasn't been there for 100 years, we probably don't have to worry about so much, but older established trees, we need to make sure we take care of them.
I can understand your concern, but in order for the construction to happen, these are the course of events that need to take place. So if you don't want the construction, you don't want power, then you don't support the poll petition, unfortunately.
Not quite sure I like the ultimatum that you're giving me. It's either let them take down whatever they want instead of
not-
putting parameters around it,
It's not whatever
or
they
they
want.
don't build.
Right, it's not, they can't cut outside of the town's right of way. The town's right of way is 5 feet off the shoulder of the road, so they're not cutting 30 feet into the woods. We're talking about a 5-foot stretch,
So it's 5 foot from the shoulder on either side?
give or take, depending on the roads, yes.
Okay. Anything further? Barbara?
No?
Okay. I see that the abutters have been notified. Are there any abutters here this evening who wish to speak to this petition? And I see and hear none. If there's nothing further from the board, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson,
I move to close the poll petition public hearing on Hitchcock Road and Doyle Ave.
Second.
thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 The chair votes aye. Any further thoughts, comments, questions? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to approve the poll petitions for Hitchcock Road and Doyle Avenue as presented this evening.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
No?
Opposed? Thank you. So it does pass 4-1. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's all we had for public hearings. Appointments, resignations. The Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee, Historic District Commission appointment, Mary Harrington. I think I saw her here tonight. No. Mary was appointed, voted in as a replacement. So if questions, comments, or a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to appoint Mary Harrington to the Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee as the Historic District Commission's representative.
Second.
thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And thank you, Mary, for stepping forward. Next, as we periodically do, there is a number of vacancies throughout the town. I just want to take a moment to run through them. Communications Committee, we have one vacancy. Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee, we currently have 2 citizen vacancies. Cultural Council, we have 13 vacancies. We have 1 vacancy for a fence viewer field driver. The Open Space Preservation Appraisal and/or Survey Revolving Fund Advisory Committee, that's one, that one's on us. I know we need to get someone on that. I will make it a point for next meeting to see what we can do there. Zoning Board of Appeals, we have 2 alternate member vacancies. So if anyone would like more information on those or would like to submit a letter of interest, please reach out to the town manager's office.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Daigle.
we do have one more vacancy that came through over the weekend. It's on the Master Plan Implementation Committee. So if anybody's interested in being on that committee, to please reach out to the office.
All right, thank you. That was the Master Plan Implementation Committee has a vacancy. All right, permits, licenses. We have a request for a permit for a bike path 5K walk run. Amanda, is she here this evening? Good evening. If you would, for the record, just state your names.
I'm Amanda Lawler.
Veronica Patty.
Thank you. So what is it you're looking to do?
Yes, so first of all, thank you for having us here tonight. We've presented here before and asked for requests before. We are hosting our annual Harper Grace Memorial 5K. My husband and I lost our first child. It'll be 5 years in November, which is insane. And every year we host a 5K, which is a fundraiser to raise funds. Initially it went to Murdoch graduating seniors, a male and female student athlete pursuing a career in human services. Over the last 2 years, we've shifted gears a little bit. I'm a nurse straight from work this evening, so we've shifted it to the medical field. And anyone looking to pursue their career, whether it be at the level of a clerical or anywhere within the Haywood or Athol hospital systems, received the scholarship funds in the last 2 years. Over the last almost 5 years, we've given over almost $8,000 in scholarships to the community through this fundraiser, pretty much primarily, and the generous donations of our community and friends. It was friends of ours here in town that established this scholarship fund before we had even left the hospital. So humbling to say the least. So this year we are hoping to bring it back to Winchendon. It was at Haywood campus the last couple of years. So the requested route for the race, I'm going to have Veronica share.
Yeah, so we thought it would be the easiest to run it on a bike path. We got a permission from the Bull Spit Brewery, their pop-up location right behind the Clark, to run it from there, so have a start and end it right there. So we would just run it on a bike path. The only road we'd be crossing would be Glen Allen. We're in contact with the PD, and we would have a detail there to make sure that runners are crossing safely, and they would be turning before they cross the next road. So that would be really the only road they would be on. And then coming back to the Bull Spit. We're hoping to have have a little bit bigger fundraiser this year. So we would have some raffle items, and having it at a location people can kind of stay around a little bit longer than just at the school or at the hospital or parking lot. We're looking to have a band as well to play for a little bit of entertainment. So we weren't sure if there's a special permit to have entertainment there during the morning hours, but that's our ask.
Mm-hmm. And the race would be, just for clarification, November 5th, which is a Saturday, with the race time to begin at 8:30 a.m. And just the other part of it, through Run Reg, which is the link that we would use for sign up, there's the release of the waiver. Responsibility waiver is listed within that for the town of Winchendon, Bull Spit, and encompassing the bike path as well.
Yeah, so what we've done in the previous years, there is a record of it, so we can provide that to you. Make sure that everybody who signs up for the race will sign a waiver as well online. So we have a list of people to do that.
Sure, thank you.
And it would go till noon, so we would have it from 8:30 to noon.
8:30 to noon. Okay.
Sorry. And we also, in the previous years, were able to ask to waive the fee for the permit, since all the money go back to the community.
Thank you. In order to have a live band, that would be a separate permit, would not, Mrs. Daigle?
If they are planning on having it other than what Bull Spit is already licensed for, they do have a license, I think it's through
So,
October.
yeah, so Jim Hahn from the Bull Spit is actually on an agenda for next month. So they're gonna be doing a one-day liquor license to be able to open for us, because they're closed at that point. I think their license goes till the week before.
Okay,
So they're gonna be open for this one day, but he's coming in next month to do liquor license for him. So the
Okay.
only thing we need really is does the band
For the
need a special permit to be able to playing from like 9 o'clock to noon?
yeah, that would be covered under the entertainment permit. It sounds like he's going to be,
So I think he's doing the liquor license.
Oh, just the
It's
liquor
one-day license, yeah, one-day liquor
He has an
license.
entertainment permit as well, but we can make sure either
Okay.
one of you will get
Okay.
that permit that will be needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
sure, you're welcome. Questions, comments from the board? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to approve the 5K walk-run race to be held on the bike path on Saturday, November 5th, 2022, as presented this evening, and to waive the fee.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded to approve the request with a waived fee. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Best of luck.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
You're very welcome. We have one other permit before us this evening for a teen movie fright night, September 30th. Perfect timing. Hi, Mama.
Right? Talk about efficiency. Thank you. I had help from Linda.
So what's the plan?
Yep, so I did not previously know that we needed a permit for movie nights on the library lawn, so we've actually done an event like this 2 weeks ago, and then I learned, and that's why I put in the permit this time. So we utilize the backstage where we do movie nights during the summer, and then I just set up everything, and I sit on the board of trustees at the library, so like very concerned about making sure everything gets locked up, the kids are treating the property respectfully. We go through at the end of the night to make sure everyone's out. We have access to the restrooms. And then we'll have the movie. The youth change makers from Heal Winchinen will be doing their lemonade stand, and then we'll also have a popcorn machine like we do in the summer. And we're doing a double feature.
Double feature.
Yes, of scary movies. That was what the teens requested, unfortunately. So, scary movies I must watch.
So like a PG-13
Yes,
kind of a thing?
PG-13. We make
Okay.
sure. Yeah. And we're partnering with the library, so all the youth that attend need to have a library card, and we've seen library engagement go up since we started doing this series.
Nice. Very good. Questions, comments from the board?
I have a question.
Mrs. Anderson?
Since the library is free and open to the public, why do you require a library card?
So we're trying to get more teen involvement, and if they have a card, that's gonna break down the barrier of feeling like you can't enter the property even if it's free. So a lot of the kids didn't realize that you could rent movies. You know, they went in second grade, they have short memories, they need to renew their cards. A lot of them are more renewals than they are new enrollments. But we're trying to get more teen involvement at the library because that's kind of where the gap is. So I have a book club with the library, and we do have some teens that are part of it, and my co-creator is also in Murdoch High. But by having them sign up for a library card, it also encourages them to visit the library at other times when maybe there's not a movie. And it also helps the library get higher engagement as well. Something I told the kids, if a kid shows up without a library card, I don't send them away and tell them they can't come. We're just strongly encouraging that they sign up for library cards.
And there's no cost to a library card.
No, it's free.
There isn't, and I do know that every second grade goes down to the library and gets their card, and
then
it's
they
a big deal.
expire.
It was a big deal for my kids a long time ago. I think I'm questioning the legality of requiring a library card instead of strongly encouraging.
Yeah, it's
a
strongly
library card.
encouraging. It's strongly encouraging.
Only because I don't know individual circumstance, maybe there's a reason they can't have
Yep.
a library card.
We take that into consideration, so we do require that they have their parents' permission, and that was a barrier for some of the kids at the library. So we worked out a solution where the librarians are actually letting them FaceTime their parents while they're in the library signing up for a card to ensure that their parents are giving permission, especially for the renewals, because, sometimes parents are busy and they can't, make it down to the library. So we are very, conscientious of that, and we want to make sure it is equitable. So that's why I wouldn't turn away a child the night of. And we had quite a few children that showed up without them, and we have some kids that come from other neighboring towns, but then we also had a lot of kids that enrolled in the library and maybe they hadn't been in before, and they were like, wow, this is really nice. They're like, do we have other events here? And I said, yes, all the time. So then being able to connect them with those other clubs and the teen reading room has been helpful.
I think my other concern is the teachers. What steps have you taken to make sure those kids are safe on moving 8?
Yep, so I'm Corey checked, and then we also have some teachers from the Winchendon School that I'm friends with that come down, and they're all Corey checked as well. And I don't just like sit and ignore the teenagers, I do laps, and then whenever a student, I told them that the park is closed, so they either need to be in the movie area or they need to call a parent to come pick them up. And we have been ensuring that the kids are safe. We had some firecrackers go off last week and I wasn't sure what they were, so I did call non-emergent 911 and have a police officer come down and investigate before sending any of the children home. And then they're not allowed to canoodle. It's okay to sit close, but I use my teacher voice and say, we're not doing that here. And then if they go off to the side where it's dark, I do a laps around the library as well. So I'm not actively just sitting there. I'm patrolling and doing roaming duty, which I'm very familiar with being a teacher at the Winchendon School. That's one of the...
How about when they leave, though?
When they leave, they're picked up by a parent.
You sure?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I know most of the teenagers too, and they come in batches. So we've kind of gotten regular kids that come. And even as kids walk off, I'm like, Tora, where's your mom? I don't see your car yet, stay back here. So I'm really good about making sure that they're safe.
Anything further from the board? Seeing and hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to approve the entertainment permit for the Teen Movie Fright Night to be held on Friday, September 30th, from 7 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. as presented this evening.
Second.
before I call the vote, I will just make a note that you'll need a temporary food service permit.
Yes,
from the
I've
Board of
already
Health.
put one in with Jim.
Perfect, thank you. So we have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you so much. The teens really have enjoyed it, and they said there's actually something cool to do in Winchendon. No shade to other programming, but they were really excited about it, and
Yeah.
they've really, really enjoyed it. We had 101 kids show up.
Nice.
Wow.
So when, are you going to leak the names of the movies ahead of time, or just keep it under wraps until that night?
It's under wraps till that night, but they do know it's 13 plus. We have it on
Yeah.
the flyer, and we make sure that they are 13 plus when
Sure.
they come. But we've just been doing scary movies for the fall. And then hopefully, once the infrastructure project is done, we'll be able to do some winter movies inside.
Nice.
Yeah,
Well, thank you very much for all your work on
of
that.
course. Of course. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, moving on. Department head updates. Who we have this evening, we have someone from Town Council, from KP Law, as outlined in some information that Mr. Sosbach sent the board earlier. He and I met with Lauren Howe and Brian Riley from KP Law about a month ago now, maybe a little bit more, and talked about bringing in a fresh face, and we have this here this evening. And please forgive me if I mispronounce the last name. It's Attorney Sirigu?
Sirigu.
Sirigu, very good.
Nice to meet you all. Hi.
The floor is yours.
The floor is yours. All right, so I'm Attorney Matt Sirigu. I've been with KP Law for 4 years now. Before that, I was a clerk at the Massachusetts Appeals Court, the intermediate appellate court for all state appeals. We saw things from across the state. It's not just the Boston court. I graduated from Suffolk Law. Prior to that, in 2018, before law school, I had a 5 or 6 year professional career as a paralegal and background investigator. So I was a later law student, you might say, have some professional experience under my belt. Excuse me. Right now, I represent communities across the state. I'm primary contact in 1 or 2 other towns, so I will, which is a relatively low number compared to most of our primary contacts, so I'll have a lot of time to dedicate to your issues and your concerns on a personal note, I'm a young father. I've got a 1-year-old. I took her up Mount Wachusett a couple weeks ago for the first time, so getting her into the outdoors. I love New Hampshire, Vermont, Western Mass, come out here as much as I can. And I would love to answer any other questions or tell you anything else about myself that I can.
Attorney, if you would, and publicly thank Attorney Riley and Lauren Howe for all the years. Explain to us, if you would, about the team set up at KP Law.
Yeah, so for most of our communities, we have a primary contact and then a primary labor and employment contact. And so those are the persons you will reach out to immediately. Whenever you have a concern, you build a strong relationship with that person. Depending on your preferences and your manner of operation, you might talk to that person once a week just to check in, or you might not talk to them. You might talk to them once a month. It's really how you like to engage and utilize your town council. From there, though, that person understands our entire internal operations and will direct certain specialties or questions that come in. The really unrivaled benefit of KP Law, within Massachusetts at least, I can't speak for any other state, is that we have the largest team of municipal attorneys that you can get. So we have people who are very well versed in land use law, labor and employment, as new things come up, solar, marijuana. We have people who specialize in those issues. And so when you ask me a question about marijuana licensing, which I don't particularly do a lot myself, I will find the person in our firm and can tap into that expertise, but you're still dealing with me on the day-to-day, and that's what Attorney Riley was in the past and what I hope to be, what I will be going forward.
Thank you. And I must correct myself. It is Lauren Goldberg. My apologies, Lauren. Questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I know you can reach out to folks to get information. My big concern, will you be the representative at our town meeting on October 24th?
No, Attorney Goldberg will be at the October 24th one, simply because I had a conflict that existed prior to these discussions taking place and these things coming up. Going forward, I would be at all of your town meetings, but just for the 24th, given the timing of things, I had a conflict I couldn't share.
Yeah, my concern is always that the attorney be well-versed in the articles that are on our warrant and the legal issues that could come up. Just so, because there are questions that come up at these town meetings, and when we turn to the legal, we're looking for an answer.
Certainly, and I could speak a little bit to our process for town meeting warrants generally, which is the primary contact or the person who's going to be at that town meeting will study that entire warrant top to bottom, and they might reach out to just to stick with the example, the marijuana specialist, if there happens to be a marijuana article on the warrant. But the person who is going to be there reviews, comments on, maybe recommends revisions, and studies that entire warrant article before every town meeting, and that's what I will do going forward.
Thank you.
Questions,
Chair?
comments? Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
My only is, are you sure you haven't changed your name and your last name wasn't Cohen and you're Michael Cohen's twin?
No, I
I
don't.
think you look just like him.
Your doppelganger is out there. Mrs. Anderson?
Yeah, well, congratulations on being a new dad. That's very cool.
Thank you.
And I do love that you like to come out here, and I think Mount Wachusett is awesome. But I would like to say I've been less than pleased with KP Law in recent years. And so I want to just establish that when you are serving the town of Winchendon, you are actually serving the town and not any one particular interest within the town, as has kind of been the case in the past. And as the end result, we ended up looking pretty foolish. And I just want to make sure that there's the understanding you directly work for, according to the charter, work for the Board of Selectmen, and we represent the town, and that's who we're serving all the time, with any time somebody goes to you for legal advice.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that statement more or add anything to it, really. It's the reason, that public interest aspect, that community, that representing the community is why you get into this line of work, I think. It's at least why I did. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I understand, and I can commit to doing my darndest to live up to that.
Thank you.
I know one of the things we talked about when we were meeting with Lauren and Brian was setting up some open house nights for the public where they can come, meet you, ask questions, have coffee or something like that. So maybe that's something we could look at and get scheduled maybe the next month or two after town meeting.
Certainly. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to come out. I know we talked, we're constantly offering public records, open meeting law trainings, things like that, whatever
Yes.
you would like us to be available for, myself to be available for. I'm happy to come out anytime.
We had talked about that as well. Is there a list somewhere of the different trainings, or you have access to it, so we can go through it and perhaps pick some out and do a couple over the next 6 months or something like that with a time frame?
We can work with Attorney Sirigu and your team,
Yeah.
maybe get a list together. I'll distribute it to the rest of the board, and if any of you have a particular interest in one item over another, just let me know.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just to start, I would say public records and open meeting are the two we do the most often, but we're happy to put together a presentation on any provision of the general laws. You have some forest lands at 61A, or anything in particular that you think is coming up or you would like a training on, we're happy to put together.
Sure. I know that it's short notice, but perhaps before the May town meeting, do you have one on town meetings?
Yep, yeah, do that.
We could do an open house or something on town meetings, too.
Yep, procedure, yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Anything further from the board? No. Well, thank you very much for your time. Welcome to Winchendon.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really nice to meet you all, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the presentation of the final, it's here somewhere, town meeting warrant. Mr. Saltzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe copies of the final draft are available for the public up front if anybody would like to read along. I'm going to go off my memo just because I have some notes here that I'd like to touch upon. So to start, where we had last left off in your previous meeting, there are a couple items that are outstanding. I believe we originally had 13 articles listed on the warrant. We're down to 11, and I'll explain how we got there. So Article 1 for the committee report, I don't know with certainty what it will contain, but I have had some early conversations with Chairman Kane of the Finance Committee, discussing potentially the free cash situation in town, where we're at presently, and what some of the nuances of that mean. So we were looking at a situation pretty much where free cash was going to range from about 800,000 to 1.8 million, and that's a big swing. So highlighting why, what that discrepancy is or why there's a difference. To date, it has not been certified, our free cash number. It will be in advance of the special town meeting, just given the timing of the year. There were some outstanding items that we've been waiting on, a handful on the town side and some larger ones on the school side, closer to about 1.2 million in outstanding grants. So basically what that means is we need to get a drawdown on those grants before we go to certify free cash. Otherwise, it looks like an outstanding expense. So it artificially ties up free cash, or what would be free cash, in that amount. That money doesn't go away. We don't lose it. It just means it won't be available until next year when we go to certify free cash. So that was something that we wanted to review with the community. All in all, what we're proposing on this warrant, and it was part of a conversation that we had with the capital planning committee, was, well, how much free cash should we use? How much should we shift over to borrowing? With the concern ultimately being, well, we don't want to draw down our free cash needlessly, which is a sentiment I agree with. So we ended up, and I'll check off each one as we go through, but opting for a blend, about half being paid for with free cash, the other half being paid for through a borrowing. But the important takeaway is a lot of the free cash items we're looking to fund aren't frivolous items. In fact, a majority of them are stabilization accounts. We're looking to take that money and earmark it to put it away for a rainy day. It's not going anywhere. It's not leaving us needlessly exposed. And in fact, something I wanted to highlight in this memo was that 1.2 million, when it does hit, is going to put us about $100,000 shy of our 5% of general operating costs goal for reserved certified free cash. So from a fiscal perspective, we're in really good shape, and we're continuing to trend in that direction. So I'm sure Mr. Kane can put that in a much shorter snippet than I ever could, and there may be value in the for the community in terms of running through that. Article 2, it's a $100,000 request for streetlights on Central Street. A good question that was asked was that if this was us going over budget or if it was a funding gap, and it was the latter. So we had banked on the Robinson Broadhurst Foundation awarding a larger amount. They did award a portion, but it left about a $65,000 gap for the municipal style streetlights on Central Street. And so now that we know that, given last May, we are going forward and asking the people of Winchendon if they'd be willing to fund the remainder of that utilizing free cash. The other $35,000 of that $100,000 number would be for streetlights at the Lake Street and Spring Street Park down by the water there that we just put in, and the new parking lot over on Pleasant Street. So the Capital Planning Committee met last Monday, the 19th, and voted 4-0 in support of that article. And if you have any questions as we go through, please stop me. Article 3, this was for Library Phase 2. It came in over budget. There was a question in the last meeting raised by Vice Chair Ward on whether or not there was $70,000 remaining from the first phase. So we did go back and check. It was there, and so we've amended the figure. We brought it down a little bit. So with that said, I did do a quick breakdown that I'm going to shift gears to here. My apologies, it didn't make it in, but I can get it real quick. No, maybe not. But it breaks down the funding. I'll review it with all of you before you do your recommendations at your upcoming meeting. But basically what we wanted to drill down was that there was an amount of funding that went through for the annual town meeting in 2021. It was $600,000 that went through in a blend of Robinson Broadhurst funding, a borrowing, and free cash. There was an additional amount, I believe it was about $314,500 that went through at the most recent special. That $70,000 remainder, all of those combined with the $145,000 that we're requesting at this time will bring us to the total amount, which will cover the low bid construction costs that came in at just under $1 million. The soft costs, which is design, architect, engineering, which was just under $200,000, and then an additional $5,000 to run temporary electricity to the basement because the library is planning on operating out of there for the several months that the project will be going on. So ultimately, on a Wednesday, August 24th meeting of the Capital Planning Committee, they voted 5-0 in support of that article, providing that it used 5-year borrowing as a funding source. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Ward.
I really have a problem with funding this over 5 years. I mean, to me, we're nickel and diming the taxpayers because we're going to have a $35 increase on an average home with the fire study, and now we're throwing, what, another $5, $6 on top of that? Why are we, when we know we have about $314,000 in free cash. This is only $145,000. Why aren't we taking it and relieving the taxpayers of another little chipping away at their taxes, adding them up? Plus, we're putting this, by doing it, a 5-year plan, we're putting it at a 2/3 vote of the town. So we're putting a project that's already in progress in jeopardy when we only need a majority vote if we do it with free cash. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Sure, and in response to clarify, so the fire station design is recommended to go through as a debt exclusion, which would be a direct increase to a resident's tax bill. For this, we're recommending a borrowing. That cost is absorbed in the general operating budget on a specific line. So a point worth drawing. That said, I don't disagree with you. I think, you know, free cash would be a fine source, given all the caveats that I just listed in advance of me running through these, and that our free cash seems lower than it actually is. But I would defer to the board if the board were agreeable to that.
So are you saying this is not going to increase the tax rate at all?
No. No, not in the way that the fire station is in terms of debt exclusion. So this borrowing, we have a line item in the general operating budget for debt service. So it will increase the line for debt service. It's going to eat into my ability to fund things when I go to make the budget next year. But in a minimal amount, it will come out to, sorry, just quick math. If it's about a 4% interest rate over 5 years, it'd be like $30,000 roughly every year starting next fiscal year.
Again, money that we could pay off right with free cash.
Without
and
paying
not
interest, yeah.
And if it doesn't affect the tax rate, it needs to say that on the warrant. Because the people that are voting need to know if it's not going to affect their tax rate, that needs to be on the warrant, not spoken at town meeting all of a sudden. So again, I just think that should come out of free cash. I'm not happy with that at all. I think it's a waste of money, and I think it's going after the taxpayers again.
Anyone else? Mrs. Anderson?
I haven't had enough time to digest what Mr. Ward has said, but I think my criticism is for myself and for others that I've heard of, is they're tired of seeing the library project there every single town meeting. And it looks like we're just getting money and not doing anything to them. They're like, what the heck? I thought we already approved this, and why are we going back for more? And it, you know, there's a mentality that we're not actually getting anything done, we're just asking them for more money.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Well, we are getting things done. Phase 1 was the elevator. This is a three-phase project.
No, Mr. Ward, that you're not understanding. But when we're looking at this electric, this is not the first time it's been on the warrant.
No.
And they understood, you know, the phase 1 and everything like that, but it continues and it continues. And it would probably be better to just do it. And, you know, in phase 2, do the electric.
I can speak to that a little bit. So as someone who a portion of my day is soaked up by this project, every time I walk in the door, I would argue a lot is being done, even though people don't necessarily see it. I do agree with your sentiment. This shouldn't have come back a third time. I think we dropped the ball on this one. It came through my first day here in town is when the first vote went through at the annual town meeting. At that time, it was based on an estimate. It was May 17th, 2021. And at that time, we had realized construction costs were steadily escalating in response to COVID. Not using that as a crutch, just as a matter of reality. And so we tried to adjust midstream, brought it to a special town meeting to try to get more funds in, but you truly don't know what the project is going to cost on the construction side until you go out to bid. So by the time we went out to bid, costs had escalated even further, which landed us where we're at today. So in response to this, what we're trying to do, in an ideal world, we should be able to figure it out in one shot, maybe two, if things are a little awry. It shouldn't have taken 3. We're trying to move in a direction where we do a design, bid, build process, and that's your best bet, in that we, as a community, would fund projects that we have an interest in funding to pay for the design first. We can do the design, we can put it out to bid in advance, 30, 60 days in advance of a special or an annual town meeting. And then we can go to the people on town meeting floor with a concrete number and say, this isn't what we think it's gonna cost, this is what it's gonna cost, period. And that's what we're looking to do moving forward. There was an extensive conversation of that with the capital planning committee. I had committed to that moving forward, as well as my team. It's not something that we did historically in town, but it's something that we're gonna be doing moving forward.
That doesn't negate the fact that, yes, this is coming before the voters again.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as Town Manager mentioned, we did talk somewhat extensively about this at capital planning, about we need to get better at this and we need to do it differently so that we're not always finding ourselves in this situation. So that design, bid, build makes more sense. So,
Madam Chair.
Mr. Ward?
And I fully understand that costs go up because I was involved with that elevator. And I know that you're dealing with contractors and costs going up. That is not my issue. I have no problem with the $145,000 cost. My problem is taking a loan for 5 years when we have free cash that we could use for this and save the town $30,000 in interest. That's all I'm saying. And that's what I'd like to see changed.
Okay. We can change it on town floor, move it that way if the board chooses,
Or an individual could do it.
or an individual could do it. Yep.
At this point, up until you place them all, it's draft. So if you'd like to do it at this time, if the committee would like to, or the board, you could do it now as well.
Are there other articles that are vying for free cash funds?
Yes. Do you want to keep going and maybe we can circle back?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Next, you will see Article 4, a request in $95,000 to increase the highway material line item for fiscal year '23 budget. So we had a fiscal '23 paving plan that we came forward. DPW Director Croto had joined us and ran the board through it based on figures that we had put together around budget season, which were March. After that, sorry, the whispering's killing me. I apologize. It's like all I can hear. It's hitting me. It's a weird room shape. Following that, by the time it got to town meeting in May, at that point, once again, things had escalated. We ended up having to drop off Pleasant Street and part of the island project. So also at that time, we were running on estimates from the state in terms of how much funding would be available. Since then, we have concrete numbers from the state. They're funding us an additional about $90,000 than what we had expected in May, which means we have that much more additional funding available in the form of revenue that we thought was going to be tied up in other areas. So given the ever-escalating construction costs, we thought it would make sense to bring this forward to try to address these infrastructure things now, because when we go to do it in the spring, it's going to be that much more expensive. What we're recommending is Pleasant Street, the top coat of Island, and a deficiency that we identified several months ago at the intersection of Pleasant and Summer. It's currently patched in a big square, but there's a drainage pipe that's collapsing running from there straight through to Central Street. So it would replace that or reline it. And the total amount between those three is $95,000. And we're recommending using free cash.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay. Article 5. So this one is the debt exclusion for the fire station design in the amount of $618,750. I did work with the Department of Local Services, DOR, and our assessor's office to try to drill down what that would look like in terms of an impact to an individual for an average residential tax bill. It came to $33.94, and the Capital Planning Committee had voted 5-0 to move this article forward. Would you like to run through those DOR numbers? We can do it real quickly. No, is that a no?
I looked at them earlier because you put them in our packet.
Yeah.
I'll be fast just in case anybody has any questions. All right, so once again, the amount that we're looking at is $33.94 based on a fiscal 22 average single family tax bill. This grid here shows you what it would look like based on different valued homes. So that's all I wanted to hammer home to people is that's the average tax bill. If you have a home that's valued under that or over that, that number is going to fluctuate. Does anybody have any questions about that?
No. Mrs. Anderson?
I think what I would like to know is, because we have other outstanding debt exclusions, and add them all up, don't take the one. I think people have a right to know when you add this all up and what year one debt exclusion is going to drop off.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. So I believe there is one fire apparatus that's presently on there that by the time this takes effect will drop off, but I'll confirm that in advance of the
That would
next
be
meeting.
good to be able to tell people that when this is added on, something else is coming off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be a good visual for town meeting also.
Anyone else?
I have a question on the article,
Sure.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Ward.
So, the way I read this article, if we approve at town meeting expending this money for the plan study to get the plans, the actual work to get the plans doesn't start till next May, right?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase that?
If we approve this at town meeting in October,
Mm-hmm.
no work will be, this will not be put out for bid, this will not be done until May. The way I'm reading this article, the way it's written.
Well, I guess it depends on when the funding rolls through, but I don't believe it will go out to bid because it's architectural and design
want to, yeah.
services. So it's not like going out to bid for a construction job, for example.
The
So
work's not going, we're not getting the study till at least after May.
if you could, yeah, it's hitting me weird. I'm not quite understanding. It's not going to be a study. It's buildable schematics.
Designs, yeah, these will be the schematics that they will,
Basically, Mr. Ward, if it passed that town meeting, then it would have to go to ballot. Once it is approved at ballot, then it would go, at that point, the money would be approved. It's approximately an 8 to 10 month process, depending on how quickly the schematics are done, the bid documents are done, the distance to go out to bid goes. So the earliest it'd be even after this coming May. Literally, it wouldn't come back in that process till earliest that I can see would be the following fall town meeting. We'd be looking at, because it takes about 8, depending on the architect and in the bid documents and how the bids go. So it takes about that long to come back with that concrete number to build the station, which is the bid build process that we're looking to do on this project.
So that's pretty much what I was getting at, that when we vote on this, this vote does not take effect unless the election and the vote in May passes.
Yes, that is correct.
So
I
nothing is
understand
going
that,
to be
yes.
done. Even though you approve this, it doesn't take effect unless it happens in May.
Correct.
So that gets to my next question. If we're waiting all that time till May, why didn't we do both of these in May? We have an election in May, we have a town meeting in May. Why aren't we just doing it so it's fresh on people's minds?
Sure. So there is a requirement, I believe it's a 90-day lead time, but I'm not sure offhand if it has to occur before or after. That might be a question for legal counsel over there, but.
Yeah, I thought we went through this once before, and it didn't matter which you did first. You could have the ballot question, or you could have the town meeting. It didn't matter. I mean, which one went first. You just had to have both.
Sure, so as long as you hit that 90-day window, but I think it's just a matter of preference.
I don't think it's a bad idea to put it on now, because if it fails, we could always try again.
the reasoning we had put forward on coming forward in the fall instead of waiting to present it in May was, no matter how you look at it, if you come forward in May, then you're still pushing the amount that you know you're going out to bid for, and then you're separating the dollar value so you can educate the community more with an actual number. By getting the process going now, then we get them going on the process on what we're actually going to go out to bid for, and then we have the actual number to present to them in the following. Otherwise, we don't start the process until May. You would be looking at the following May, so you're looking at a 16-month window versus a 10-month window, basically. It's just starting the project that much sooner, but also starting the process with, because it is a 90-day window, as Mr. Solzbeck said, so we'd be looking at starting it months earlier to get in the process and the better bidding times of the year, because certain times of the year are better to bid on projects too, so.
Well, I'm not seeing the logic of that, but because to me, you can take all the months leading up to May to get all the information you need to share to town meeting or to the vote. So, and you can't contract out with anybody to start doing the plans because that is dependent on the vote in May. So you can't do anything other than what you're doing now, is try to get as much information as you can. And you can get a lot more information between now and May than you can in the next few weeks. Just, that's all I'm saying, is just logistically, I don't know why we're not just doing it all in May, but I have no problem.
Anything else?
Yes,
Mrs.
Madam
Salter?
Chair, I have a question. So I just want to know, so what are we going out to bid for? Are we going to say we have a budget of 8.5 million? Can you give us plans that fit that budget? Or are we just going, because my fear is we're going to go out to bid, we're going to spend this $600,000, they're going to come back with a project that's going to cost 15 million, say, and that's not what we're bargaining for.
Correct. What we would be going out to bid for would be, we've currently done a cost estimator just recently, a few months earlier. We took that cost estimator, and that was based on the plans that we had, the rough schematic that we had put together to show on the design. That design bid would go out to bid. It could come in at 9, or it could come in at 8.1. There's no knowing exact, but the cost estimator did have a accelerator, I believe it's called, built into the project of close to 10%. It was a 7%, and there was 3% built in another section. So the cost escalator was figured in, and that's where we still came in at that the price point that we're talking about for the $618,000 that the design would be on.
So we're putting out to bid, we're looking for plans that fit that design.
Yep, so it's the architect that we're actively working with, that we've been working with even before I got to town. It's the same one. And so since I got to town, Chief Smith and I have been working with that firm to drag that $12.5 million station down to about an $8.5 million station. So they know definitively what we're looking for in terms of the floor plan, and they know that it should not exceed $8.5 million. So they'll be designing something based on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further? Thank you. Mr. Salzbeck?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next up is Article 6. It's about a $9.5 million request to repair the main water line. Nothing about this has changed since your last meeting. We did tweak the language.
I thought we were going to replace, not repair.
Excuse me. Yes, replace the main water line running into town. Important distinction. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So the only thing that changed is the wording to make sure that we're checking all the boxes. For anybody that's here in the audience that's not familiar with what that's covering, it's basically an opportunity for us to apply through the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. That has a forgiveness of about 19%, so right off the bat, we wouldn't be paying that full amount. There are some other items that we're gonna try to line up in here, conversations that I've had with members of FinCom, trying to highlight what this amount actually means. So when we're bringing it to the town, we have to bring it in a full dollar value and get approval to borrow legally in a full dollar value, but that's not the amount that the people of Winchendon are gonna be paying for this pipe. There is right off the bat that 19% forgiveness. We're also setting up meetings with members of the state and federal government trying to identify different pots of money or resources that could help defray some of this cost. Ultimately, it's worst case scenario, it would be about a $350,000 annual debt payment. We're gonna work to try to pull that down to about $250,000. Or maybe a little bit lower, but those are things that we definitively can't start working on until we get this approval in town meeting, which seems backwards, but that's the way it's set up. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I have two questions. On all the other capital articles, we had the capital planning committee vote. We do not have any capital planning committee vote on this article. Why?
Sure. So actually, as I was putting this memo together, that thought had occurred to me as well. And the only answer that I could provide, honestly, is that I didn't bring it before them. I kind of hold it in a separate category in the same way that any other water, sewer-related infrastructure doesn't really pass through the capital planning committee traditionally. I just didn't think to bring it before them. So,
But it is on the capital plan.
This is not necessarily something, not in that amount on the capital plan, no.
So it's not on their list of capital
So
projects.
anything that's in the enterprise fund has its own separate capital plan, it's its own separate pot of money. So in my mind, it's divided, they're separate things, and that's why, like town side capital things, purely town things, I have traditionally steered through the capital planning committee. But anything like this, the water plant has capital needs that we share with Ashburnham, so it's not gonna be on our main capital plan. The wastewater one, yeah, we do own it directly, but in the same way that we separate the water capital plan, we separate the wastewater capital plan. It could go before the capital planning committee. It is an expense that realistically, it's not gonna be paid entirely by the ratepayers. It is gonna end up being a town expense in some capacity. And, I see no harm in maybe asking their opinion on the floor, but point taken.
So worst case scenario, if there was no grants or anything, is a $9.5 million cost to the town. Worst case scenario if everything else failed.
The worst of worst case scenarios. We're also gonna try to work to value engineer it a little bit. At the end of the day, a pipe's a pipe. But we're gonna try to value engineer it to pull that number down before we even start. But yes, absolute worst case scenario, it would be that much. It's a very conservative figure, and it definitely won't exceed that figure.
So between now and town meeting, we're going to try to chop that down.
So we can't.
Not before town meeting.
Okay, then we need to let the public know, worst case scenario, this is how much your tax rate's going to go up if this passes.
Correct.
We have to have those numbers for
So-
the average home.
So that number that you see in the actual article language itself is based on the number that's on the application with the trust. And so that's why it needs to be that amount, and that's why it needs to be conservative. There are other things built in there, like contingency, for example. You're gonna run on the assumption that you're gonna hit way more ledge than you're realistically going to hit, but you don't wanna under budget for that because God forbid you hit some type of vein of granite or something that happens to run right where your pipe's going. There's a lot of intangibles, and I think that's the difficult part with these type of projects, especially for me, where I prefer to have a definitive answer and a definitive number. Sometimes we can't do that for all components of these projects.
Just want you to know that you know what the first question is going to be at town meeting. How much is this going to cost me on the taxes? That's going to be
Now,
the first question.
Isn't this going to be paid by water users versus taxpayers?
So that's part of the question that rose in the last meeting we had. So we'd ideally like to, pull down the cost right off the bat through value engineering. Secondarily, we're gonna try to get grants. And so whatever remains, and I don't wanna commit to a number, but whatever remains, the question is gonna have to be, will that be paid for by the ratepayers, or will it be paid for as some type of blend? That's not something that I care to stick my neck out on and offer a guess, but I would imagine it would have to be some type of blended funding source.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Anderson.
are we ever going to create a water sewer committee that their sole purpose is to be that overseer of these kind of projects?
Do I hear a volunteer?
Well, I think that we need to.
Okay.
That, you know, the scope of this, and as every other project goes before capital planning, and yeah, the enterprise funds don't, but you know what? There should be a committee that's looking at it.
Sure, and if I
Not
could.
just us in 5 minutes.
Right, and if I could offer, whether there's, one committee, 10 committees, or 0 committees, this pipe is broken. And the cost to fix it is the cost to fix it. So I get what you're saying, and I welcome more public input. But on something like this, it wouldn't really change the outcome.
I understand what you're saying, but I also understand what you're saying. So, yeah, let's look into it. Maybe at our next meeting, we can have some thoughts on how many people or what makeup or whatever, and bring something forward.
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Can I make one
Oh,
highlight?
I'm sorry, Mr. Proto.
So one of the biggest things that the town manager hit on is the Massachusetts system for this loan is broken. What it gets us is a fixed interest rate, but what it doesn't do is give you a hard number or tell you exactly what you're getting for grants monies till you're approved. So without this approval at town meeting, it's pulled off from the state and it doesn't move forward on the project process.
Right.
So it's kind of backwards if you ask me. They're supposed to change the process, but who knows how long that could take. So it's,
Yeah.
without a positive movement on this, it'll get pulled from the state. And the additional funding that the state potentially could put into it, we won't get. We'd have to start from zero and go back again.
And I think this is all part of the presentation to be made. I see another hand back there, just a moment. At town meeting, is we've got to lay out all aspects of this. Worst-case scenario, what we're looking at for annual payments, where those payments, is it a blend? How would we gonna meet those payments? And
What happens if the article fails?
yeah, what happens if the article fails? Bottom line, the pipe's broken, it's gotta be fixed when it all gets over and done. Point taken.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Is it possible that an article like this could have a caveat in it? I mean, you're talking about these state funds that even what the minimum estimate would be, how much the state would put towards this project?
So
Could
Mr.
it be a
Saltzberg gave
caveat
that.
that if we don't get the minimum state amount?
So because we're low income, or we're designated as, I don't remember the exact term, but we're guaranteed 19%. Outside of that, I'm the same as the town manager. I won't put my neck on the line, but there is additional funding out there because of ARPA, because of federal funds. What that is, I don't think anybody in this room has a clue. But there is, it's out there, and we're told it's out there. Nobody will come forward and tell us exactly what it is yet.
There is an expectation that the forgiveness is going to be higher than 19%. That's the floor. But I couldn't venture a guess whether it'd be 5% higher or 20% higher. They're pretty tight-lipped about it. But we can't change that language. That language is like for the purposes of the fund. It needs to be written that way. We can't put a back door on it or anything like that.
You can't say pending 19%.
It just flat out, we have to commit to funding the whole thing before they'll even entertain the application.
That verbiage came from the state.
Thank you. Mr. Lucia? And then Mrs. Santos. Okay.
How you doing? Rick Lucia, Maple Street. This is a perfect opportunity to take that 2.5 override money and start using it for a project like this. It's $366,000. Even if you used it for the first 3 years, it would give you chance and opportunity to apply for different grants, go to different areas, but it's money that has been used by the schools and now could be used for all of the taxpayers in this town, not just the ratepayers. You gotta get off that ratepayer darn thing, you know? I paid for a betterment that never came anywhere near my house. I didn't cry about it, I had to pay it. So you could do the same darn thing with everybody in this town. The water needs to get here, and the water needs to get here, and we need a fire station before we need to keep spending money on the library. I noticed already in the article changes, $80,000 disappeared from what he was saying that we need to put into stabilization. It went from 160 down to 80. Anybody that looked at this would say, oh, gee, well, they must have took that 80,000 and put it onto the library, because that dramatically went down from 215 to 145. It just happens to be the 80,000 that disappeared from stabilization.
Madam
I don't know
Chair,
where you guys do your math,
Hold on,
but
Mr.
somebody's got to
Lucier.
start looking at this stuff.
Thank you. Mr. Salzback?
Sure. So if I could just offer, the amount that the library requested from the last meeting went down as well considerably, by about $70,000. The reason that you saw a decrease in that stabilization fund is because it's based on a pre-established policy from the Finance Committee. It's based on a percentage of our available free cash. That the two are not connected.
Thank you. Mrs. Santos?
Good evening. Tina Santos, 117 Mill Street. I guess watching and being at previous meetings, I was under the impression that this article would be, or there was mention of whether or not it would be town paid versus the water users paid. I know there was a lot of discussion on that, back and forth, et cetera. So my question is, can we put in this article and confirm whether or not who is actually paying, depending on the state funding or, you know, other kind of fundings? But I feel that, you know, the water users are always getting hit with higher rates, and then now this. If that main water breaks, we have no water in Winchendon whatsoever. So that means this building, all our town buildings, our school buildings, and businesses down on Central Street and all around town. So not necessarily just because you do not have water, you have a well, that does not mean it does not affect you. We have employees and/or residents that work at Town Hall. We have our schools that have, when I moved out here about 16, 17 years ago, I did not have children. I pay my property taxes. That goes towards the schools. I didn't have children in schools. That doesn't mean I'm going to say, well, I'm not going to pay my taxes just because I don't have children. So we need to, I agree with Mr. Lucier, we need to get away from water users versus well users. We're all a town and we all benefit no matter what. Events, school, town buildings, businesses, etc. We need to stop putting it on one set of people, our water users and sewer users, because it's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further?
Molly Velasco, 31 Cross Street. So I just want to remind, like, I know you all know, but I want to remind everyone in the room that the library, it's not like a fun project, it's a safety project. We have no fire suppression system, which would protect both the collection and also the amazing staff that serve this community. And the library is one of the only free places, like you so pointedly point out, and one of the reasons why we needed additional funding was when we realized that the Wi-Fi wouldn't reach the basement for everyone to be able to do that, and also we couldn't pull power from what's already existing safely. And in addition to that, it is one of the only spaces that our very, very large and ever-growing homeless population can go and get warmth in the winter. You know, like that is one of the main focuses, and that was a concern of the Board of Trustees. So that is one of the reasons why we needed those additional funds once it went up. So I just want to remind everyone that while there is some beautification that comes along with opening up the walls afterwards, it really is about safety first and foremost.
Thank you. All right, moving on.
Article 7, we are requesting $110,000 roughly as part of our financial policies, which represents 10% of our annual health care costs. So that's an effort to try to insulate ourselves a bit from our OPEB liability. Article 8, $50,000 is a set figure for contractual separation payouts. Article 9 is to fund the stabilization account, which, as I just referenced, it's based on a preset figure, a percentage. So we had a $160,000 placeholder. It's supposed to be based on 10% of our free cash. So as I mentioned, it hasn't been certified yet. That number has been fluctuating. We did announce in the last meeting we expected that number to go down. It was just their highs, conservative figure. We feel that free cash is going to be certified in the $700,000 to $800,000 range. So as such, we've amended it to $80,000. Once again, all of our funds, the OPEB, contractual separation, and our stabilization account are all significantly higher and continue to climb over the past year or more. So we're in good shape there. Article 10. So this was originally worded as a special reserve fund, and after some advice from legal counsel, we're just going to leave it at reserve fund. So it's going to be an additional $50,000. It'll be in the same pot as the rest of the finance committee's reserves, but the intent remains the same. It would be for the purposes of addressing volatile energy costs that we tried to address heading into budget season, but they continue to escalate. So we want to make sure that we're just protected on that end, given we're only a third of the way through the year or so. Article 11 is a combination of Article 12 and 13. They were both charter bylaws. One was from the 2021 annual town meeting. The other one was from the most recent 22 town meeting, but we held it off in order to combine the two to make it less confusing into one article. The changes themselves are mostly small, nothing terribly significant, but it does, the article language itself does link you directly to that, and I believe it's included on the back of your draft warrants. So the first piece of it, the first of the two articles, what was originally Article 12, was passed at the annual town meeting, but it had to go to a ballot, and it wasn't brought forward to a ballot. Article 13 is just tacking on to what already passed on Article 12. And it's things like adding zoning, where it just says Board of Appeals, for example. A lot of housekeeping items there.
Madam Chair? I'm sorry.
This is the point.
I was going to ask if you know, or if anybody knows, Section 3-1, Item F, the recall of elected officers. So it looks like it's changing based on the last recent annual town election to just the number of registered voters. I'm wondering if we know if that makes it harder for our constituents to recall us or easier, because I think they should be able to if they see the need, and I would like it to not become more stringent on them.
Sorry, where are you?
The recall of elected officers.
Number 6.
Number 6?
Here it's, I have it.
Oh,
now.
above number 6, right above
6.
number
Okay.
6, yeah.
Foxtrot.
So it's changing to be a percentage of registered voters as opposed to a percentage of whoever voted in the last election. And I'm wondering if we know if it makes it harder for our constituents to recall us, or the same, or easier.
Sure, so I think the reasoning there was that we have fairly low turnout. And so if it was only based on 20% based on the most recent annual election, then I would say statistically, based on current stats, that number would be lower. So it would be raising the threshold, I believe.
Thank you.
I picked that one out because the way it's worded doesn't make sense. The total number of persons registered to vote as of the date of the registered voters.
Yeah, there just needs to be a longer strike through,
So,
probably, right?
yeah. So that just, the verbiage there doesn't make sense as a sentence. Mrs. Anderson? Oh,
Can I ask one more?
yes, Mrs. Point.
And I don't think I have the right sheet in front of me. Was this a 2021 approved change, or is this a 2022?
So it's a mix. So,
This 1F is a mix?
I apologize. I don't know if that fell in 21 or
Okay.
22, but I can confirm and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mrs. Anderson?
I don't know. I think what bothers me is changing, like the charter changes in general. The charter was only supposed to be reviewed every 10 years, where the bylaws every 5. And so they took it upon themselves to go into the charter as well. And charter changes just make me nervous as a general rule.
Sure, and that's the reason why we opted to not, or why we pulled the 22, because we didn't want to be dipping in and out every year. It seemed, I think for the reasons you described, that's not something that we should be fiddling with that frequently. And I did just separately receive confirmation that it was 21, so it was something that already passed.
Thank you.
I had a question as under page 3, section 2.7, letter B, we're adding on the town bulletin board and the town website. Should the words "and the town website" also be added on 7-8, letter B? Second line, and pending vacancies to be posted on the town bulletin board and the town website?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'd see no harm in that if you want to amend that before you place it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we're going to, I realize one refers to calling a special town meeting, and the other refers to a vacancy in a position, but, you know, realistically, how many people read I look at them,
I don't.
the notices on the bulletin board downstairs.
Never.
So that by having that posted on electronically, I think that would get the word out a lot better.
I think we have to do better than electronically in the bulletin board. I really do. I like the code red, or whatever it is we use.
Yep. Code red.
Not everybody's on electronics. And we have to remember that.
Yep.
Not everybody goes to town hall and looks at your bulletin board.
I do when I'm right down the hall, because you can only have one person in the collector treasurer's section at a time. Any other comments on these? Okay. That was the last one, wasn't it?
That is correct. So at this point, the next step at your upcoming meeting, the Finance Committee is going to be meeting tomorrow night to review this for the public hearing. And then following that, the selectmen will have one additional meeting where you'll vote to whether or not to recommend a particular article.
So the Finance Committee public hearing is tomorrow evening, and then the board, we are meeting again on the 3rd to make our recommendations. Okay. I may need to do that one remotely. I'll keep you apprised.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I still would like Article 3 to come out of free cash.
Okay. So, anyone correct me if I'm wrong, we can approve the warrant tonight with amended articles, correct? We have the ability to amend these articles that are before us. So, Mr. Ward is indicating Article 3.
Again, only because this is an ongoing project, and I hear this in town. We have all these projects, but none of them get done. This is when we can finish up, at least Phase 2, get the electrical up to date, get some fire suppression in the building. You know, that building could go up in flames, and we're going to be losing not only our town history, but a very valuable building to this town. And I just think jeopardizing it and making it a 2/3 vote and spending $30,000 additional on the taxpayers, it just seems crazy.
Okay. So is that a motion, Mr. Ward?
I move to have Article 3 funded through free cash.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, change Article 3 funding source to free cash. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Anderson?
I don't think, I'm not comfortable doing that without checking with the town manager in his budget and his, you know, he might already have something earmarked for that free cash. And it's not our place to go there and say, no, we're taking your free cash and we're gonna do this with it.
Thank you for your consideration. I'm touched. We can clear it.
That
Thank you.
sounded a little sarcastic.
It was sincere. Just surprised, but we can cover that. Thank you, Mrs. Anderson.
All right. But a valid, very valid question, very valid point. All right, so we do have a motion on the floor. It has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye.
I don't even remember what was moved.
To switch it to free cash.
To change the funding source to free
Oh.
cash.
Okay, aye.
Oh, aye, okay. It passes
I'm
5-0. All right, so now we have before us the entire warrant.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move the board finalize the special town meeting warrant for Monday, October 24th, 2022, as amended and presented this evening.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded to approve as amended. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, just to confirm, that includes the recommended changes you had for the charter?
That one thing you had, like, about on the board.
Oh, yes, the addition of the words "and the town website" under 7-8.
And there was one more piece where you felt it was worded oddly?
Oh, the registered voters piece.
Yeah, but I don't know what to put in there. I don't know how would we word that?
It should say, the recall petitions, shall be returned to the office of the town clerk within 20 days following the date they are issued, signed by at least 15% of the registered voters. Correct? Am I missing any words you would like in there?
I think that's it.
Yeah. It could just say-
Current, maybe, do you want it to be currently registered voters?
Wouldn't hurt.
of current registered voters. 15% of the total number of current registered voters. Okay.
I still don't like the change, but that's what it should say.
And then we're going to add the words "and the town website" to 7-8B after bulletin board. Thank you, Mr. Ward. I will move to make those changes to Article 11.
Second.
Isn't there already a motion on the floor?
Was it
There
for
is.
both of them?
We already voted for the first, we already
I
voted.
thought we just seconded
Okay.
the
Free
three vote.
cash.
I'm sorry if we did, missed it.
Would the maker and the seconder of the motion to accept the warrant rescind their motions?
Madam Chair,
Mrs.?
the current motion is to finalize it with the amendments discussed this evening, so it would
Amendments as
include
discussed.
As
what you talked
discussed?
about.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're covered.
okay. Thank you. So we have before us a motion to approve the special town meeting warrant as amended and discussed this evening. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you to all the hours that go into that document. Next up, continued discussion, Town of Winchton and Gamma, thank you. The grant agreement regarding the opioid settlement funds. Mr. Solzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're joined this evening by Representative Zlotnick, who I must apologize, I told him this would start around 7:30, and Mr. Sean Hayden of Gamma, as well as our Fire Chief and Sergeant Walski, to kind of revisit this conversation that we had at a recent meeting. As part of that, it was asked that we go and talk with our chiefs a little bit further and have some conversations about realistically what this would look like for Winchton, and specifically, if the board were to entertain such an agreement, what benefit it would bring to Winchton. As part of that discussion, the chiefs all felt that any effort to try to do in-house work that Gamma already does would be, duplicating efforts. And at minimum, they would want to make sure, as part of any potential agreement, that we would be ensured access at no cost to specific items such as Narcan, PPE, and the emptying of needle disposal bins, which are items that we currently pay for out of our budget. And so we'd realize a little bit of a savings there. And so at this time, I would turn the floor over to the representative, if you want to dig into it.
Thank you for having us again. Since we last talked about this, my compatriots have recovered from COVID, so we're all here tonight. And if you may recall, we ended our last discussion that we would follow up with the leadership of the police and fire department. We have done so, and that is the sort of summary that the town manager just provided for you. So if there's any other questions, we're happy to try and answer those as best we can. And I also want to point out that I'm joined by Representative Whips, who is joining me in representing Winchendon moving forward.
Nice.
I apologize, I didn't see it till I looked up, but it was too late.
Happy to be here, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we start with this, can I just say, for Representative Whips, that I was very concerned at the primary. I didn't see your name on my ballot because I'm precinct 1. And so I had to contact Representative Zlotnick, who explained to me that because you're an independent, you weren't on a ballot in the primary, but you're still representing Winchton.
Yes, as an independent, I don't have to participate in any partisan primary. I have already qualified for the ballot in November, so you will see me then.
Okay,
Thank
so
you
it's
for
very
asking
important to
and
get
for the
people out and
clarification.
voting.
It's a little civics lesson for people. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Questions, comments for the board, or we have the chief, and I guess you're still sergeant, right? Correct. For another couple of days.
Good evening.
I think I would like to start with Sergeant Wolski and Chief Smith.
Okay.
Sure.
So we have your letter, but let's hear from you directly.
Sure, so just to sort of recap the letter, we did discuss this, and I'm already...
Just a little bit closer to
Sure,
the mic.
sure. Can you folks hear me?
That's better, yeah.
Okay, for those of you that don't know me, Sergeant Dan Walski with the Winchton, with the police department. To recap the letter, I'm already currently working with Gamma, with the post-overdose support team, so I'm sort of uniquely familiar with the resources that they provide to the greater Gardner area, which includes Winchendon. And in speaking with Representative Zlotnick, it sort of made sense to us not to reinvent the wheel in terms of if we had to use all of this money, make the decision on how every dollar was going to be spent, we'd have to spend a tremendous amount of the money just on developing the resources, the infrastructure, hiring people potentially. A lot of it would be wasted on those things, which Gamma already has. So to simplify it, like I said, it makes sense not to have to reinvent the wheel. However, by the same token, we think that Winchendon should have some exclusive benefit. We should see some exclusive benefit from this money. So we, in the memo, mentioned some specific things, such as purchase of PPE, the needle and prescription drug bins, which we currently have to pay for the disposal of, Narcan, nasal naloxone. And then also, we can expand, and Chief Smith and I talked about maybe doing some educational programs in expanding and improving upon the post-overdose outreach program that we're already doing. And we discussed possibly doing some other things down the road as well. It'd be nice to have access to a portion of the funds exclusively so that the town of Winchendon is getting an exclusive benefit. However, we do think it makes the most sense to use the majority of the funds to support the position at Gamma. And that's the, what's the name of that position?
Recovery Support Navigator?
Yeah, Recovery Support Navigator. Chief Smith?
Yeah, basically just to add, the main concern that we had when we sat down was to make sure that Winchendon got specific items that were personalized to the community. We wanted to make sure that if there were certain things that we felt we needed to draw off of, or that we needed to spend the money on certain, details, we wanted to be able to, where we were pretty much, I think, the second largest portion out of the 5 town group. So we wanted to be able to potentially itemize some certain things, but at the same time not reinvent the wheel. We do feel that it's a very valuable program. We both see and deal with the outcomes and of all this every single day. And I think it's something that moving forward, that with the support of the town and the other surrounding towns, that will be something good moving forward into the future that we can continue to draw off of as far as to better the community.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Yes, I'm all for what the chief and sergeant have said. My question is, if we approve this, how do we put in that we get so much for Narcan and PPEs and all the other things that we feel should come to this town? Is that possible, that a portion come to the town?
Yeah, and that's a component that we're looking at, is we want to make sure, whatever the document ends up being that we craft, that it calls out those items specifically. I think maybe trying to work off an average, if we have a history available, some type of data to support how much we're requesting. That is part of the conversation, is that based on the formula the state put together, Winchendon does receive a significantly higher portion than a majority of the other communities that would be entering into this agreement. And so that is why we feel it's important that we try to ensure that we receive, it's called out somewhere in that document, that we receive additional supplies or support, or, something along those lines. But if the board is agreeable to this and authorizes me to enter in negotiations, that is something that we'll be exploring and definitively putting into the document.
Thank you. Anything further?
I think I'm more interested, now I want to know what exactly is this substance abuse? Forgot already what it was.
Navigator?
Navigator.
Want me to speak to that?
What will it do for us?
Sure. Excuse me. So Recovery Support Navigator is an actual clinician, right? So this is a bachelor's level clinician who's trained specifically in navigating the systems of care around substance use treatment, as well as connecting people to the other crucial systems of care they're going to need to access, whether it's medical, dental, housing services, all the kind of holistic needs that a person's going to need to put their kind of life back together if they're struggling with addiction or substance use. It's probably not a great reflection on our industry, but the systems of care around addiction treatment are disconnected, complicated, And for a layperson who might find their family in crisis, who's trying to access these things without someone with some of that kind of inside knowledge, it can be really challenging to understand. Where do I turn for help? How do I access it? What are the steps I take to access the different levels of care? So this is a person who's specifically trained in that area, who can work with anyone, really. You know, we do a lot of work right now using these navigators, addressing homeless populations. I know that came up earlier in the meeting. But really anyone in any circumstance who's struggling with substance use, this is a trained professional who can help them understand, how do I get from where I am today to where I want to be? And it might sound like a small task, it can be a really complicated task. So having a clinician specifically available to the people of your town, I think would be great. You see that in larger municipalities around the country now. They're starting to employ clinicians, but the cost to do that for a smaller municipality is usually cost prohibitive. This is an opportunity for the town to share in a program spread across a few towns where you get access to that but not have to bear the entire cost of employing a full-time clinician.
So I guess essentially, we'll just be funding one position that will help us?
So what we're going to do is we're going to fund one FTE, but what that really means is you're going to get our entire roster of recovery support navigators. One of the things the rep and I talked about was if there were space available in the town, we would love to set up office hours specifically in Winchendon. You're always going to have access to these people on an on-call basis, but if the town were interested, we would love to have maybe, you know, a couple of days a week where that person were available for anyone to walk into to get information or access to services.
And the reason, as we've discussed this over the last several months, doing it on a single FTE model as opposed to an individual position is that gives us access to the broader staff that Gamma employs. One, to make coverage more readily available as the caseload ebbs and flows, and then also to better pair individuals with clinicians that better suit their needs.
Yes. Yes, that's fine. And then Jane.
Sorry, I'm very chatty tonight. Molly Velasco, 31 Cross Street. So I have a couple questions. One, would it be possible where would I find like what your current protocol is? Like anyone in town, if they wanted to see what your like intervention protocol currently is, because you mentioned a training.
Well, I do a post-overdose support, so if any overdose events, recovery coaches from Gamma, and also in the past it was AIDS Project Worcester. They would meet with me and we would go and actually visit that person and see how they're doing, number one, provide them resources, direct them, provide them Narcan if they wanted it. And obviously it sort of becomes, depending on how much the person is receptive, the more assistance we can provide to them. But fortunately, like I said, Gamma has a myriad of resources. So if a particular person is receptive, now we get them hooked up with Gamma. I mean, the results can really be, you know, very positive.
Yes, definitely. Super supporter of Gamma, and we actually provide CSA bags to them, so very familiar with their great work. My other comment, I guess, would be, was gonna be where would they be based out of? Because not everyone feels comfortable, especially if they're struggling with addiction, being present in a police station.
Sure.
So I was going to suggest connecting with Miranda Jennings, the director of the CAC, and having office hours there. I know that they provide lots of different supports that are similar, and they would be a great asset. So that was my suggestion.
Yeah, we already work pretty closely with the CSC, so if there was an opportunity to partner with them on that. The nice thing about the RSN model is we can bring the service to the individual.
Yeah.
So we do this now. If people are unhoused and they're, you know, living in a tent or whatever, we bring that service to them. So we try to remove that barrier of access, but it's also nice to have a place where someone can walk into, particularly if they're already accessing services, if we're able to figure that out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane LaPointe, Central Street. I think this is an amazing sounding program that you're talking about, and to have those resources available, because I think oftentimes it's pretty easy to underestimate the severity of these issues you're talking about here in our town. And what I'm interested in when I hear about all these resources that exist and these different skills and capacities that these people have is if you were to come to town and do this, I'd love to try to figure out how it could be leveraged. I mean, we can't duplicate and replace these people, but how to share the information and get more of a flow of information out there so that different people who might know of folks who could benefit from this, we can try to figure out how to, I'm not being very articulate here, but how we could figure out how to set up more of a network kind of a thing so that we take the stigma away from this. I mean, we're going to be doing some programs at the library to actually work on this and coming up. And I see a lot of opportunity for synergy and just, so I'm hoping that in this, it's as these resources come here, but they're there and people can go there, but there's some other connection we can make to amplify it more. I don't know what else to have to say about it.
To speak on your point, that's one of the main things that we talked about when we met, and we met with the representative, is the ability to individualize it to Winchendon so that we can think of a way to get that information, whether it's through trainings, whether it's through meetings or something at the school with some educational programs for the, maybe the outgoing juniors and seniors, or maybe the younger ones to bring home to their families, because it may be a younger sibling that happens to notice an older brother that's using pain meds every day after football practice, and it's developed into some type of an addiction. So we're looking to get that information out on multiple different levels, whether it's to the children at the library, whether it's to Halloween at the fire station, whether it's to these various different events. We look to take a portion of this specifically to individualize for here in the community.
If I may add to that, it's my intention going forward as well, and I'll have the capability to do it starting next week, to utilize social media platforms a lot more to get the message that you're saying deserves to be preached on social media. And obviously nowadays it's a very effective means of communicating. So I think your point is very valid, and it's probably maybe an area that we could increase the broadcast of.
Well, because what I'm thinking of is that, if I see someone who might be homeless or is struggling in some way, what do I do?
You certainly could come
because that's my phone. We'll ignore it.
I'm sorry. This is a very, very important conversation.
This is a topic here.
Maybe take it offline.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very important. I don't
No,
need
but
to.
if we can follow up, that's.
Thank you very much. Okay, anything further from the board or anyone? No.
Just the last thing I'll
Yes,
update
John.
everyone on. Last time I had spoke before you, I listed the towns that we were in the process of speaking with. That list is still the same: Gardner, Winchendon, Ashburnham, Westminster, and Templeton. Since we last met, Gardner and Templeton have moved to schedule these, what we're doing here tonight. And Westminster and Ashburnham are, I would say, a few weeks behind that, but we're anticipating that happening sometime in the next month or so.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Ford?
Edward Ford, Central Street. You guys know that there's a building vacant right at the intersection of Spring Street and Central Street. You guys could move in there rather quickly and set up shop. As well as the CAC would also love a representative once or twice a week, whenever you guys can. And PPP, personal preparedness gear, BOLO. I do not want another one of my officers crying because they are concerned of a biocontaminant spit at them, bled on them, or having to clean it up out the back of a police car. That BOLO will protect them from getting any biocontaminant on them, provided they are licensed to use it appropriately.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Do you require a motion? Or?
If the board is in agreement on this, or in terms of moving forward, I guess an authorization for me to move forward in negotiations with the intent to bring a complete document before the board for a final review.
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Anderson?
I'd like to make a motion to let the town manager move forward with the negotiations and bring a final document back to us for
Second.
Approval.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next up, 8.2, the cable television license renewal.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson.
could I just, because people are here for the Front Street, and I would like to make a motion to take 8.3 out of order, if that's possible.
Okay, made and seconded to take 8.3 out of order. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are on 8.3, update on temporary traffic patterns, School Street. Mr. Saltzback, how quick can you switch all right, look at that.
So real quick, the board reviewed this back on your August 15th, 2022 Board of Selectmen meeting. And at that time, a desire was expressed to receive additional feedback from citizens. So with that said, we did issue a code red, reverse 911 call over the weekend. And in addition, we did put a call out on social media. We received some feedback. I did also receive feedback via email that I distributed to the board just in advance of this meeting. But Madam Chair, you do have a copy of that as well. So with that said, some other considerations that we're intending to make, we would like to get a definitive, bless you, direction on this sooner rather than later. At that time, we will be going forward and updating, different GPS programs, Google Maps, things like that, to help avoid people needlessly going down a one-way or a closed-off road. And we will be making sure that we communicate our intent with MassDOT as well. So with that said, if anybody would like to add anything to that, now is a good time.
Well, I think there's, okay, I'll change my thought. I'll open up to the board. Questions, comments at this point before we open up to the public?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward.
So I guess I want to go back to what originated this issue at Front Street in that area. So there's a danger there, right? Because I hear anecdotally that we have accidents there, and I'm just curious, we have the police here, we have the fire chief and DPW. How bad are how many accidents are we having there?
A lot.
I mean, I want to hear it from them, really.
You can come up if you'd like, but it's pretty frequent.
Without having the exact number here before, I would say on a rough estimate, there's probably at least one accident there, I'd say every other week, at minimum, approximately.
And the reason I ask this is a serious safety issue, that intersection. And I know because I go to Waterville a lot, and coming up or going down, it's tricky. I guess what I'm saying is, when I see on this a possible motion for the selectmen to make, I don't believe this should be coming to the selectmen to make a possible motion which includes leave the present conditions untouched. This is a decision that's made at the town manager's level, police, fire chief, DPW. We don't know traffic flows, we don't know safety regulations, what the danger is. I mean, this is really something that should have been already decided. Now, having said that, when I look, I mean, you're going to get all of our personal opinions, how we deal with it. Personally, I'm for fully closing that section of Front Street. Because when you come down, and you're coming down from School Street, trying to look down and see who's coming up from River Street, and if there's a car from Front Street trying to go down and it's coming down, it's blocking your view, you can't see, you're trying to dart across, and if you look at it, there's areas for those few houses in that neighborhood to go up around and go around the Rocking Horse to come out. So again, I think this should just be decided by the town manager. It's a safety issue. But if I was giving my opinion, I would be closing that section of Front Street. That would be my choice.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
I live there. I know these accidents. Nothing has stopped these accidents. We have had 2 since you closed it a month ago. And quite frankly, Mr. Ward, it is the determination of the Board of Selectmen. We should have had the public hearing first, heard from the public, heard from the people that live there, and then you make the decision and do it. Instead, we did it backwards, but we're doing it now.
I have no problem with hearing from the public, and I've read about it on Facebook. And I have no problem us giving our opinion. But when it's a safety issue,
okay.
it's up to the safety folks.
Let me clarify a few things for you, because
at a
I know
time.
exactly what I'm talking about.
If
When
there's
you
a
take-
safety issue.
One at a time, please. Mrs. Anderson
When you
has
take the right to
floor.
go down the hill, shutting off that end of Front Street doesn't stop that, because as you're coming down School, that's when you take the right. Shutting off Front Street does not stop that at all. And the accidents have continued. That really wasn't the problem. The problem is School and 202.
But we're not shutting down School Street, and that's not even an option. I forgot what I was going to say just now.
It's on your board.
You got him frazzled.
Well, I'll jump in here for just a minute, and just a moment, please. I am going to ask for public input. First off, this change at the top of Tannery Hill, and then also Front Street, making it one way out of Blair Square, I had actually broached those 2 subjects with the previous town manager, Mr. Hickey, shortly before he departed. So it was something that I've had on my mind for quite a while, and I'm the one that approached Mr. Saltzback. I gave him a couple months to get his feet wet, but recognizing that those intersections were the real bugaboos in that stretch of town, I brought it forward to Mr. Saltzback's attention, and then kind of moving forward with it from there. But I understand what you're saying, shutting down that section of, can we bring a map up, please, Justin? If I may be so informal. Hurricane Ian.
Oh, my internet's down.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Okay. All right.
Jeez.
So we've got School Street, River Street. I agree, closing that off completely, you know, the traffic trying to cross from School Street, across the traffic, and then going down that little stretch of Front Street. It's not gonna solve the whole issue. I think what it could do is take one piece of the equation out, like what we did at the top of Blair Square going to Front Street. We took out of the equation traffic coming up the hill on Front Street, looking the U-turn down to the right to see if there's traffic coming, and then trying to merge into Blair Square. I think it's a start. Whether there's, how else we handle that, I do agree. You're still going to have traffic. You're still going to have traffic coming down 12, whether they go up here or whether they just come down 12, they get to where the big 18-wheeler is, and they're going to split into 2 lanes, one going this way and one looking to come down the hill. So we need to look at what we're going to do at that specific intersection. But I feel that taking that flow of traffic out of that corner completely, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of traffic coming in, you've narrowed it down to 3 anyway. That's my thought.
Madam Chair.
Yes, we'll get to public comment in just a minute, please. Mr. Croto.
What I would propose is to close Front Street in full, and then make a dedicated right turning lane and make a dedicated I guess it's gonna call a left. That could be achieved by closing it off and then putting the proper markings in place.
Excuse me, try that again?
On,
No, repeat yourself, I couldn't hear you.
coming off of School Street, you're gonna either be able to take left to come downtown, or you're gonna have a dedicated, right lane. So it's gonna be painted out, but what's gonna define that is where, Mr. Saltzback has that line drawn right now, that would be all curbed. So there's no way for people to cheat. It's very well defined, it's very well structured. It's either you take a left or you take a right, and there's no more confusion. What you're having is people going up around the island, taking a left, and then going on the other side of the island where the trailer truck is, and then trying to take another left to go down in front of School Street, which is causing the confusion.
I think, no. What the problem, one of the problems is, I don't care if you dedicate that line to taking a right. When you're taking the right, like if I'm going to the dump, people who are going left cannot see who's coming up the hill.
So would you rather leave it where it's one lane? So there's no dedicated right lane, it's one lane, either you take a left or a right?
No, we're gonna do our thing anyways.
Well, no.
Not if we narrow
But
it
I'm
down.
telling you, the problem is
Not if I shrink it.
not.
I wonder if there's any way to improve that line of sight.
It is the line of sight is, the problem is not taking the right. It's when you do that, you're blocking the view from the person coming out taking a left,
So can-
if
can-
somebody's coming up the hill.
Could you stagger the stop lines?
Yeah, but that just, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate, that doesn't mean the person's gonna stop at the stop line. Yeah, we 100% can stagger them, and I don't see an issue with that, it's people actually doing it.
Right, I love one of the comments I read somewhere, it's not the road configuration that needs to be fixed, it's the drivers.
Correct.
You know, and I saw that comment. Absolutely. Rules are for honest people, laws are for honest people. But perhaps staggering it, again, if they do stop, at least that would maybe help with the line of sight for those people looking.
We
to go.
100% could stagger that right-hand turn back, because you can still see what's coming, so they could stop at the line, proceed out, and then go.
Yeah, that might help a little bit with that line of sight. All right, I'm going to open it up to the public. Mr. Ford?
No, Mr. Blake is here.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Blake.
My name's Cliff Blake. I live at School Square, 6 School Square, and a problem that hasn't been addressed with that
A little
road
bit
being
further back.
closed. Excuse me?
You're getting a little feedback, so just,
The problem with that road being closed, making it one way, is when trailer trucks are coming through town that are supposed to go to Athol, don't make the right turn and they go up Route 12, their GPS tells them to take School Square and come back around to get to 202. And there's at least 3 or 4 tractor trailers every day that end up in front of my house. I have to go out. One day I had to go move the rubbish buckets out of the way because he needed room to back. One day I went out, there was a tractor trailer. He was trying to maneuver to get back out to Route 12, and a gentleman come out of the bank, and he went to the back of the truck, and he signaled him and walked out on Route 12 so he could stop traffic, so he could back and make his way around. There's at least 3 or 4 a week, and then there's also like some straight jobs, you know, they're pretty good size, and they have trouble maneuvering too, because they get to the end of School Square, and there's no...
yeah, they can't go left to come back.
So you're saying they go in that triangle? Is that?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah.
Yes.
The trucks
And
go
then they
in that triangle?
And then they gotta back up.
So they come down 12, GPS tells them to take School Square to Front Street
To make their way back around.
instead of just going down. Could we make that School Square,
Like a big no truck
no
entrance sign?
trucks or nothing over weight limit or size or something?
That's gonna be a component of this. If it were shut down, down at the exit there, it would be improvements, before you make the turn onto School Square at Front Street to make it clear to people that, you know, you can't get out that way, but also improvements to School Square, paving, widening or narrowing in some areas, formalizing the curb, more signage, some trees, because we like to sprinkle trees around when we can.
Yeah.
But that would all be part of this process. We're not looking to kind of do a Band-Aid on this. We'd like to actually do it right. And so, you know, the short answer is yes.
we can put signs, like in other
More
places.
orange barrels?
No,
That'd be
no
great.
more orange barrels, posts, that say local truck deliveries only. So if they
Yeah.
go in there, they get stuck, it's on them, and then,
No through trucking, no through
correct.
trucks.
Then it's dealt
something
with
like
by
that?
my friend over here.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Ford, and then the gentleman next to him.
Edward Ford Central Street. Now, you see where that Mack truck is in that little triangle that comes out? Can we just cut that right off and send everybody going down the hill over that triangle?
Possibly. Who owns that? The food ranch used to be there.
I'm sorry, what triangle do?
Down,
that thing right
down.
there?
Nope, that next one
No.
down. That one.
Yeah.
That,
Where the
that
food
area.
ranch used to be.
That's owned by the town of Winchendon, but that is very steep.
It is
and there's
steep,
rock,
yeah.
and
But-
that's not a very cheap alternative.
Yeah.
No,
But
it's a great idea,
something to
but
consider,
not cheap.
yeah.
Well, I was thinking we make that all them going that way from 12 and Front Street, then maybe you'll get some more lax in the situation.
Maybe. I
That's
mean,
not
it
even
is
that bad
steep.
as a steep, though.
And I can
That-
see, on a snowy day or something, if in fact we did put like a on-ramp kind of a
Yeah, like an on-ramp
return
right there.
merging onto traffic, just we need to make sure that they're able to stop before they hit the merge, but yeah, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Sir? Yeah, it is. But, maybe if we go back, I don't know, first 10 feet isn't bad or something like that, I don't know.
Good evening, I'm Mike McKenzie. I live at 409 Front Street. I've been there for about 23 years. This proposal is not going to justify anything there. The accidents aren't from traffic coming from School Street to Front Street. They're from School Street to River Street, as Ms. Anderson has noted. The problem that we do have now currently as residents is when you come down Front Street and you get to the closed-off portion, there are more traffic cones and signs in the street that you cannot see traffic coming up Front Street that has just crossed Route 12, and that's where the accidents are. There's been twice since these cones that I've almost been hit at that intersection because I can't see past those cones.
Okay.
Because there's traffic parked on both sides of Front Street at that closed-off section, and when you come to those cones and you have to turn left, you can't see who's coming up that street.
Okay, thank you, point taken.
So this isn't going to work. This isn't going to solve your problem. It's just an additional problem.
Yeah, I recognize that it won't solve the problem. We're looking to ideally rebuild the whole intersection. I'm wondering if making Academy one-way, going away.
Oh, my God.
I know.
You know what? Little town, we don't need one-ways.
Just a thought.
No.
Okay. Anyone else in the public?
I think Tina
Oh,
had a
Tina,
hand.
yes, please. Brian is hiding you from my line of sight.
Hi again, Tina Santos, Mill Street. Ooh, very sensitive, sorry. I agree with Mr. Ford in regards to coming down. I mean, if we've, my concern is that I understand Ms. Anderson's concern when you're taking that left, somebody's kind of coming off to take a right. A lot of the vehicles, they come down to take a right. The vision is blocked. However, if they block that portion off, there is going to be tremendous traffic down School Street. Like it already has, or it already is, with people coming up on, side by side. So I know we've graded at like Toy Town before, if we can grade and put a walkway or pathway over a wetlands at Toy Town, I don't see why we can't just kind of come down if that's town property. And I understand you're talking about the slope, but look at Tannery Hill, how much of a slope that is.
True.
That's even steeper. We need some kind of lights or something, because again, coming down School Street from like the Legion onto Front Street is just so much traffic, especially during the weekend.
Yeah.
With how it is now, and if you block that off and not allow anybody to kind of do side by side taking that right, it's gonna make it even worse.
Yeah.
It's not an
I
easy
don't think-
situation, but.
Yeah.
Madam
I
Chair.
don't, just one second, please. I don't think making it, single lane would be the resolution. And this is kind of like Winchendon's Route 2. Route 2 was never designed to handle the amount of traffic that it does now. 140, the back roads per se. School Street was never designed for the amount of traffic, mostly commuter traffic, that we see come through these intersections. So we're kind of, we're starting from behind the 8 ball. Mrs. LaPointe.
I think Ms. Santos makes a good point, which I was thinking about just shortly before she started speaking. Have we priced out, or how cost prohibitive would it be to look into, I don't know what they would be called, like the sensor operated lights at that intersection? I mean, there's 4 directions of traffic coming. Maybe we just need to invest in red light, green lights, that at least some of them are, the sensor operated.
So my concern with that is stopping a truck on the hill coming up. So I'm fine with stopping you, Academy, coming from Town Hall and coming off of school, but climbing that hill, most trucks have all they can do to get up that hill. Other than that, I think it's a great idea. That hill makes me nervous.
But,
Madam Chair.
we need to, your point is taken, though, yeah.
A few years ago, we had MassDOT do a study. They actually did the traffic study. We have it. And they put a rotary where those islands are, so that coming up Tannery Hill, you just keep bearing, or you can take the rotary. And that really is the only solution, not blocking off roads, not making them one-way. Put a rotary there. We have the plans, we have the study. And that was the only thing that worked. We can't have lights because of the issue with trucks.
May I suggest maybe a stop sign?
We have them all over the place. You know how many
Oh, I
times
understand that. People go
DPW
through
replaces those signs?
Well,
I go out there, whoop, new one.
Well, that's how I know when there's been an accident, because I drive through there fairly regularly, and when I see something's changed, somebody must have knocked that down and they put it up 6 inches farther this way or something like that.
My husband and I literally were coming up the hill, and there was somebody dragging a stop sign under their car going down. Sparks
It's not
going-
funny. We've had so many fatalities in the
Correct.
last
It
couple
isn't funny,
months.
right.
Yeah.
Is there,
It's crazy.
I vaguely remember the study. It would have to be a
I
very
still have it.
small
I have it.
rotary.
If anybody wants it, I got it.
A rotary at Blair Square would happen over my dead body, but I could see a rotary at this one.
I don't know if there's enough room, though.
Here?
Yeah.
The state,
was.
The
If
state
you
is,
cut out the corner Mr. Ford suggests.
the state is always going to recommend a rotary. That's their go-to.
I mean, I hate rotaries, but
Well, they got it all planned out, and you know what?
Keeping in
That's
mind
the
that we're
only
all-
thing that would work.
Keeping in mind that we're all certified engineers, right? To Barbara's
Yeah.
point earlier, this isn't our expertise.
But
Right.
we had a certified engineer
Oh, I
do
hear
it.
you. I hear you.
It's hard with MassDOT because they do throw a rotary at everything for a solution, and sometimes it's not the most practical solution. And the elevation change there is kind of difficult. So I'm not sure about that.
Sure. All right, to kind of get back on track, so, any other comments, questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, general point. I just couldn't help it with a comment on a rotary. A rotary is going to create the same problem as a traffic light, because anyone who's already anyone coming up the hill, if it's a big truck and someone's already in the rotary, the truck has to yield for anyone in the circle. So we're still going to have that problem of big. That's our problem for our town, whether you're coming up whatever way into Blair Square. You got to come up this big hill, and I don't know. Have traffic engineers anywhere figured out a solution for how you deal with steep roads and big trucks.
But when the engineers did it, they had it so that there's always a right lane for coming up the hill that you bear to the right, and that's the only place it was wide enough for like 2 lanes, one to be on the rotary and one to come up Tannery.
Right, but what if they want to hang a UE to the left?
So again, you're
Yeah.
going to...
You would have to bear over to the
You're going to rely on the fact that the drivers who are using this rotary know enough not to get into the lane that the trucks are going to be able to come into.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yep. You've already spoken on the issue, Mr. Ford. Anyone who has not spoken on the issue? Okay. I think I tend to agree with Mr. Ward. I don't personally feel that this is a board decision. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. Guidance, you've had input from the public, et cetera. What's the board's pleasure?
I think I have a problem with you not thinking it's a board decision, but you're the one that picked up the phone to get this one-way put in place.
Beg your pardon?
Didn't you, you're the one that wanted the one-way, right? The one-way.
I suggested it, yeah.
And now it's not a board decision. So I think I'm confused.
I didn't mention it, I didn't bring it up as a board member. I brought it up as a citizen who goes through that intersection on a regular basis.
Interesting.
Mrs. Anderson obviously would like to have it be a board decision, so.
I do.
All right, make a motion. I entertain a motion.
I'm not sure what my motion is right now.
Okay.
Let me think it through.
Sure.
I don't like the idea of blocking off the end. I really don't like the one-way at all. I'm all set with one-ways, and so is everybody else. I'm not sure leaving it alone and not touching it is the answer either. Obviously, something needs to be done, but that problem is School Street where it meets 202, 12 and 202. That is where the problem is. You know, obviously, we've had 2 or 3 accidents over the last month. So the solution that's been offered isn't working. I mean, it's a constant problem. We have to look at something else.
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Lapointe?
Have the accidents increased or decreased since we did the temporary, whatever we did there?
I'd have to get back to you on that answer.
It's about the same.
The same? I would say if they've somewhat decreased, then maybe for now, let's keep it as it is, but I don't, so never mind. I'm unhelpful because I don't know the answer to my question.
I don't really want to leave barrels out there, and we're coming to the end of barrel season, so.
Yeah, the orange barrels, and he's right, they are confusing. They confuse the heck out of me when I see them and I'm coming back. Either way, you know, whether you're on Front Street or coming up, you know, to take that left. And then, of course, people who aren't familiar with Winchendon, if they're taking the left off of 202 to get onto 12, and you got all these orange barrels and lights going, and it's just, it's
Something has
crazy.
to be done before winter. Absolutely, I agree. What is the pleasure of the board? Excuse me, what is the pleasure of the board?
I think I would like to sit and go back and look at the plans that we had before. Look at what our alternatives are. I don't like the one-way, I don't like the blocked off street. And I don't like to not, I don't think we should leave it alone either.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would make a motion to table this item.
Yeah. We have a motion to table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
And then, in the meantime, you know, people who live there could always offer suggestions. Oftentimes, they know better what's going on in their neighborhood and what needs to be corrected.
Madam Chair. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay, Mr. Sussback, go ahead.
So what I did receive in emails, and I only received 5, 4 out of 5 had very excitably requested that we fully close Front Street. Social media was a little bit more of a mixed bag.
So the other thing is, if we're gonna go back and look at the Mass Stop plan, we can't afford the Mass Stop plan, because I'll guarantee you the minimum of the Mass Stop plan is probably about $3 million. That's just open to do, and we can't even get Blair Square done for
Sorry.
1.5.
Yeah. Well, we have a motion on the floor to table this. Do we want to bring it back to another meeting, or?
Yeah, I think we should talk about it again, give it some time. And in the meantime, I can get my plans and get them to the town manager, he can distribute them. And, you know, let's think about it. Let's actually put an effort into it instead of putting another orange barrel out and calling it a one-way. There's an accident, let's put an orange barrel out and call it a one-way.
Do you think it would make sense to open it back up to normal to see if the increase in accidents pick back up? And then, obviously, we're not going to be able to do construction now. We're going into October.
That's a great question.
Let's ask. I would rather not, because I don't think the sample size, you're not really going to get anything that's representative of any trends.
What do you mean?
So if we like put the barrels up for, you know, a month or take them down for a month, it's not a large enough sample size statistically to get any meaningful data out of whether or not it's improving or making the situation worse.
Well, unless I misunderstood him, winter's coming, and just take him down until we figure something out. You know, he won't be able to do anything before winter anyway, right?
Sure, so ultimately my concern is if we remove the barrels and don't do anything, that we'll never do anything.
Madam Chair, can you call the vote?
We have a motion on the floor to table this. It has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 No.
Chair will vote aye.
I'm sorry, I just feel like we could hash this out all night and
Yeah.
we have other stuff to do.
While we're on the topic quickly, something adjacent to this, the Blair Square one-way, we are going to formalize, actually in response to a call from Mrs. Anderson about the too many barrels we have downtown. So we would like to move that forward. And we have received good feedback on that. I think across the board, pretty much everybody was in agreement that there was no need for people to be pulling into Blair Square from that point. And despite what you may have heard, no, it was not a favor to the church to add more parking. That's one frequent conspiracy theory I hear around town. No, so we'll be adding curbing and a bench and a tree and just closing that off and getting rid of the barrels.
Thank you. I saw your hand, sir. We had a motion on the floor.
I get that. So the motion was to table it, I understand that, but in the meantime, the barrels, so when one of my kids gets hit there, just remember we tabled it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just say that I had to go up that road not recently, and coming back, knowing I had to take Lake Street, there were no real signs that made me take Lake Street.
Are you saying coming back up?
Coming back
coming
from
down High Street
Old
up
Center, going,
So that they've been
there was
moving-
nothing really to deter me from going the wrong way on the one-way, which is what I saw that big truck do. That's a very easy error to make.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do, part of the issue is that it's been a temporary solution, and sometimes barrels and other things tend to walk away or people move them. But as part of that, there'll be additional signage and more things kind of indicate to people that you shouldn't be going up that way. But certainly, once curbing in an island is there, you'll know far before you get to that intersection that you shouldn't be going out that way. It'll be, painted in the road, there'll be arrows. But for now, we weren't doing any of those things because it was temporary.
There's a 3-foot by 3-foot do not enter sign.
There wasn't when I came down.
There's been a do not enter sign for 3 months
It was off to the side. It wasn't in front of the road.
Right, because you can't.
I knew I had to stay to the right, but it wasn't there. I guarantee you.
We'll do better. That whole area down that way is a little needlessly wide and kind of falling apart anyway, so we'll brush it up as part of that.
And if you would please, to the gentleman's concern about the lines of sight. Have someone drive it, look every option to see if there's any way that any line of sight can be improved. He indicated that his children were in danger of being hit. I don't remember what his exact address was.
I believe it was 424.
Okay,
So that's a ways down.
okay.
And just to confirm, the board would like to table this until the spring?
No,
Not that long.
So you want to come to a decision over the winter with the intent to execute in the spring?
as soon as possible.
Okay. Because we're getting late into the season is what I'm getting at. So,
Well, I don't think Brian could do anything before winter anyways, but that doesn't mean we don't want to work on it anymore.
you can put anything, or you can do anything he puts his mind to. But it's a very tight window. We could do it now. But what I'm saying is if we're going to table, I just want to make sure everybody knows that means it's not going to get done until the spring. Just because it'll get too late into the season.
You can put it on a future agenda anytime you want, right?
Well, you can make the decision, but I mean, in terms of like out in the street, we can't do anything. Like, we're not going to be out there in the middle of winter, or once the snow
I'm
starts
saying
going.
if you want it on the agenda in 2 weeks from now, you can put it back on the agenda 2 weeks from now and we address it then, right? If we have other ideas. Just keeping it on tonight, it was going to be a 3-hour conversation with no resolution.
Mm-hmm. So yes, if you wanted to, but I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, is how long do you all want to table this? Like, what's the expectation?
As soon as possible, once we get a feasible, workable plan, is my expectation anyway.
Okay, well, I'll have to ask, a plan for what? The entire intersection? I mean, I said it very clearly, I didn't think this was not going to solve the issue of that whole intersection. It was an attempt to alleviate or take out one part of the equation. So when we say we want to table it, are we tabling the discussion as to whether or not we're going to close off the corner of Front Street? Or leave it open, or leave it as it is? Or are we tabling the discussion of what are we going to do for the whole intersection, which is obviously going to take more than a couple of weeks to come up with something. I'm not clear in my mind what it is that we're looking
tabling
to.
this intersection discussion, right? Because that's really what the discussion's all about. We can say we're talking about just Front Street, but
Right.
clearly it's not just Front Street.
Correct.
So I know that the town manager and the DPW director and everybody else already has a ton on our plate, but this is a pressing issue. So if we need to get some sort of other input to make an educated and an informed decision, then that's what we need to do. We can't just base a decision like this just because it's what people on social media want, or it's because, you know, what one individual on the board wants. It's an important thing that has an impact to lives and
Absolutely.
people's physical safety. So we need to do it the right way.
We're meeting again on October 3rd. That's just to make, on the warrant articles, correct?
Correct.
We want to add this to that October 3rd meeting?
Sure.
Will we have new information by then?
Maybe.
And I guess that's what I'm
Okay.
kind of getting at. I have no other new information to provide on this, so if the board has any direction on what information might aid them in coming to a determination, that would be helpful to me.
Okay.
But otherwise, without that direction, we'll be going into the meeting on the 3rd with the same information.
Slow down a little bit.
Sure, so otherwise, without that direction, we'll be going into the meeting on the 3rd with no new information, would be the same.
I honestly think a week is too little.
Can we circulate that study that was most recently published about?
Barbara, you said you had it?
I do, I have it, but not within a week's time, I don't think.
Can you circulate it so we can read it?
Well, no, I can definitely, but I gotta go up and dig it out and get it to the town manager.
So what's our next meeting after the 3rd?
The 24th, which is the annual.
Oh, my
Yeah.
or,
goodness.
excuse me, the special.
The special. So do we move it to our first regular meeting after the special?
And then it's getting too late
Getting too late.
if you wanted to do something. But also, I mean, if it's a determination that you want to do one of these rotaries, to reiterate what Mr. Croto said, that's a multi-million-dollar solution.
I can do my best to get it to you, and we'll have some information on the 3rd. I can't guarantee you that I'm ready to make a decision on the 3rd.
No, that's fair. Yeah, if you would, please put it on the agenda for the 3rd, and if need be, we'll pass it over or do something at that point.
Do you remember what year it was
Thank you.
that it came out?
No, not off the top of my head.
I'll see if I can't look for it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We are back to 8.2, the cable television license renewal. Communications Committee has begrudgingly approved, vote to forward this to us. Yeah, $2 off extra services. I agree. Not much.
No,
As chair of the Communications Committee, anything you want to tell us, Barbara?
just that we were very disappointed, not so much with the negotiations. We feel that the town manager did a very good job with that, but more with the discount for senior citizens being $2, and it's only $2 on a premium package, not even basic cable. Very disappointing. But the reasoning for that is because Comcast claims that the senior citizen discount would equate to price regulation, which it's illegal to do by FCC regulations. So they will not negotiate on that.
Okay.
I'm not even happy with the 10-year contract, but because of the fact that our Comcast subscribers are going down, more and more younger people are using Comcast internet and not the cable. Actual subscriptions are going down. If we made it a 5-year contract, we could actually lose. And I guess the gamble isn't something we wanted to do.
Okay.
And so it seems, according to the attorney at KP that specializes in this, that's pretty much the best we can do.
Thank you. And I'd like to take a moment to thank all the members of the committee. Barbara Anderson, Greg Vine, Bill Clinton, Dave Connor, Guy Capacero, Camille Hart, and Ray Coe for all your work on this. So we have this before us this evening. Any questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Lapointe?
At the risk of, I don't mean to minimize the effort that was put in, because I realize it was huge, but it might be the time to draw a line in the sand and talk to our state representatives and be loud and a squeaky wheel and obnoxious and do some sort of legislation to fix this, because it's absolutely ridiculous.
Quite frankly, it's Congress. So yeah, we are not done with that. And that is our next step, is contact our Congress woman and senators, see what we can do.
It's ridiculous.
Very disappointing, but they have an oligopoly, and that's really our only avenue. So if you want to help, feel free.
I do.
Yep. Anything further? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I move to approve the renewal of the town's cable television license with Comcast Cable Communications Management, LLC, for a 10-year term from October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2032, as presented this evening.
Seconded.
Thank you. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Madam Chair, my vote was a no.
I beg your pardon.
That's okay.
My apologies so it does pass 4-1. Okay. 8.4, wastewater request for proposal update. At the board's request, it was pushed back to this meeting so the board could have more time to review the issue. So I will open it up to board members. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair?
Mrs.
I'm
Anderson?
going on the record. I am not interested in extending a contract. We've done it 3 times already. I'm sick of it. Done. I'm not playing with them anymore.
Anything else from the board members? Just to, would you just please review for the board? This was the, sorry. This was the RFP for running the wastewater treatment plant,
To kill it.
correct?
That is correct.
And we had one company who came to the mandatory walkthrough, and that was Veolia.
Correct.
You did reach out to some of the other companies who had initially expressed interest, and they will not be putting in an RFP.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Questions, comments, motions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to terminate the RFP process for the wastewater treatment plant and authorize the town manager to negotiate and enter into a 3-year contract extension with Veolia North America.
Seconded.
thank you. Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
The chair will vote aye. 8.5, salary study discussion. Mr. Saltzback, if you could give us an update on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be brief. So your last meeting, we discussed this. I had brought forward a proposal from Community Paradigm, Inc. The board had expressed an interest in soliciting other firms to do the work. So I did reach out to Municipal Resources, Inc., who were backed up until the spring and were not interested, and also the Collins Center at UMass Boston, who were interested and offered with the same scope to do the services for $5,000. Community Paradigm, Inc. was $7,000. As I highlight in my memo, the dollar value isn't always the clear indicator of who you should go with here. I do see value in either firm. Community Paradigm, Inc. has a lot of experience with our community and is very familiar with our region. That said, the Collins Center, could potentially provide a fresh set of eyes, and there's always value in that. I don't have a preference particularly, so I'd leave it up to the board.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the board? Mr. Ward?
Yeah, just maybe a simple question, because we're looking at comparable towns and what they pay their basically town hall employees. I mean, can't we just do this with, it's easy to find out how much they're getting paid, what the benefits are.
No, it's not.
Or you can put in a request.
It's very confidential.
But a
And
lot
why
of
are they going, how do we know what they provide us is true? They're not going to provide it to us. That's why you use another company to do
Well-
that. Because we're going to rely on gathering information from other communities. And, they're very confidential about a lot of that information.
But most
in my
town
opinion.
salaries are public.
It's all public
It's
information.
not that easy.
Not when you get into benefit packages and stuff.
Yeah, you're getting into the nitty-gritty of looking at, say 10 different communities, not only at salaries for 30 different roles, but you're looking at different collective bargaining agreements. You're trying to figure out, what their offer is, what their offering is for healthcare. Are they a 70-30 or a 65-35? And then on top of that, trying to weigh like each individual community's economic situation. If this was something that I was capable of doing, I would have done it. Basically, and I don't have the bandwidth either, to be honest.
It's not just gathering the information, it's analyzing the
Right.
information and going
I
from
just feel the question needed to be asked. And we're not talking about a huge sum of money here, 5,000 or 7,000. Now, I notice in the motion that's proposed, it doesn't say utilize ARPA funds, which it did say in the first motion when it was brought here at our last meeting.
That would still be my recommendation if you want to add it in.
So it would be from ARPA funds.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Lapointe?
a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into an agreement with the Collins Center for the purposes of executing a market analysis and salary survey for town hall employees and use ARPA funding to fund the survey.
Discussion?
Seconded for discussion, okay. So it's been made and seconded for discussion. Discussion. Mr. Ward?
Okay, I keep hearing that we're going to use comparable towns. One thing that really, maybe it's just a mistake, but it jumped out at me from UMass in their proposal to the town. It is important to remember the survey is for the labor market and region, not necessarily for comparable municipalities. Isn't that what we're looking for, comparable?
So that's an excellent question, and the answer is yes and no. And so the point that the Collins Center is trying to get across is that it's not only reflective of the region you're immediately in, it's reflective of how far people are willing to drive from other regions, such as the Merrimack Valley. I think that is what they're trying to determine. And even if there was a community that was comparable to Winchendon, but it was far closer to the 495 belt, they may not have to offer as much to get people to drive that far out. On the inverse, the cost of living may be that much higher a little bit close to the 495 belt, and maybe they do have to make out for it. But like those are factors that they weigh. That is something that we realistically couldn't do in-house. So that's a good example. But that's the point that the Collins Center is driving at, and both firms would account for that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
No.
I will vote aye. Motion passes 3-2. 8.6, special municipal employee. Again, this is coming back from a previous meeting. Town manager would provide a memo. Mr. Salzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be brief, the circumstances over this haven't changed. And I just wanted to reiterate that despite the way it sounds, it does not mean an employee is getting special privileges. That's not the intent here. It is a piece of legislation that exists for the purposes of disclosing these type of interactions in smaller communities. It's to the benefit of transparency. And so the question that was left at the last meeting was that I was going to have a recommended motion from legal counsel, and I did not have it yet. So now I do have it. So if the board has any questions, please, by all means.
No, I would just like to state that I didn't have a problem with the individual on an individual basis making the blanket statement when the system of checks and balances in local government is that citizens serve on the boards, and it is imperative that we maintain that integrity. Once in a while, you get the exception, and that employee would get special status, but I will not just issue a blanket statement that anybody that serves on the Board of Health or Conservation gets special employee status. Mm-hmm. I think that's dangerous.
And I would stress that they're still accountable to the same degree that everybody in this room is. And I think if they, overstepped or misstepped, they would run the same situations everybody else is. All it's doing is functionally allowing them to exist on those two separate planes, but requiring them legally to record as such with the clerk's office. So I get your concern the way it appears it could be, but you're still held accountable just as much.
You kind of are, but you're left with the public wondering, like, is that person employed by the town or isn't that person employed by the town? In the case of the gentleman that stepped forward, he claimed he was, and he's stated he would recuse himself. All that needs to be said, and then I trust he will. And each time state, because I'm an employee of the town. I need to have that happen. I don't know how else to say that. It's important.
Understood. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
This may be a shock, but I'm going to have to agree with Selectwoman Anderson. I mean, I know we keep saying they don't get special treatment, but they do get a lessening of the restrictions. In fact, when you go to the state website, it says the conflict law is less restrictive for specials. It also says if you are a special municipal employee, however, a more lenient rules apply for you.
Right.
So,
In what,
again,
in what respect?
in
What's more
respect to-
lenient? I'm curious.
Respect to,
Recusal.
you know, you can have an interest in a company where somebody else may not. You can hold multiple jobs in town, for town government, where others may not. I mean, you can go in, there's a whole bunch of examples. My concern is, we've never had this, we've never had a need to it. When you take office or you join any committee, you raise your hand and take the oath to the town of Winchendon. And in that oath, you agree to follow all the conflict of interest rules. We have to sign statements if we're in a conflict. It's already there. Why are we picking two organizations, the Conservation Commission and Board of Health, for special treatment? Will this eventually lead to everybody being relaxed? We're going to go to all the committees? I don't see the need for it. I don't think we've been given an example of what's pushing this. Why do we need it?
Madam Chair,
This is the point.
I see your concern, and I agree. I think the answer to one of the questions is because in a community like ours, there aren't enough volunteers to do the positions anyway, and the one volunteer we did get happens to be an employee.
But he took care of it, his situation himself.
Right.
So why issue the blanket?
Because that's the only way to do it.
Legally.
Yeah. No, I hear it, and I don't disagree. I just think it's the
If we
only.
don't do this, does that mean Mr. Larochelle can't serve on those boards?
He would either have to resign or quit his job.
From both boards?
He would either have to resign or quit his job or quit the boards.
Well,
He can't do both.
That's what I mean, resign from the boards or quit his job. Yeah.
Right.
He could also recuse himself if an issue has a direct impact on his.
Right.
No, but you're saying he can't serve at all?
He wouldn't be covered. And that's what I'm trying to say, is like, he can recuse himself all day. And this very well could have happened in the town in the past, and you didn't take action on it, and that's fine, and you know, you got away with it in so many terms. But now that it's been brought to our attention, and it's like out in the daylight, functionally, this is something that we should do. I've done it before in a similarly sized community with very little fanfare. It is not as freeing and liberating as I think it's being perceived to be. It's paperwork. It's just paperwork. There's no way that could be abused, and it's literally a law written by the legislature that upholds. It's from the Ethics Commission. They made this. It's of their own creation. So even they acknowledge that there are instances where it has appropriate use. You know, there's nothing else I can really say about it. I get your nervousness, but I guess I just don't agree with your perception of the situation.
Why are we designating members? Why don't we just name him and say, we'll designate him as
It's a
special
blanket,
employee?
you have to.
It's the way the law's written.
By law.
There's a piece of legislation for you to be active about. I said there's a piece of legislation for you to be active about changing.
Yeah, I'm on mass.gov right now. It says, it is a municipal position that is designated as having special status, not the individual. Therefore, all employees holding the same office or position must have the same classification as special municipal employee. So all members of the Board of Health would have it. All members of the Conservation Commission would have it. You cannot separate out an individual.
I don't like it.
And I feel like, and I hate to like oversimplify this, but if it were called like a marked municipal employee, for example, I don't think it would hit you all as strangely. I think there's something about the word special that is really turning you all off.
Could we vote for one board and not the other?
You could, but functionally it wouldn't help us.
I know.
Yeah.
my thought, to share with you guys, my thought is I'd be much more comfortable doing it for the Board of Health, because isn't it a lot smaller than the Conservation Committee?
Can I,
And maybe we'll just make him resign from the Conservation Committee, but still serve the
Then
Board
they,
of
yeah,
Health.
they can't, they have trouble sometimes meeting their quorum as it is, I think.
Oh, do they?
but Board of Health is independently elected where we appoint conservation. We're responsible for conservation. But he got himself elected to Board of Health.
Yeah, I don't think it differentiates between elected positions and appointed positions. Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to stress is that realistically, it doesn't create any more opportunities for abuse of his role than any of you would have access to, or anyone else, or me, or anybody.
It's not him that I'm concerned about, it's the blanket statement and what could happen down the road.
Well, him or anyone, anybody
Yeah.
that would fall within that category wouldn't have any type of special treatment, despite the name special municipal employee.
Right.
It's an exception. That's it. It's just an
Yeah.
exception.
All right, questions, comments, further? Mrs. Santos?
Tina Santos, 117 Mill Street. I guess my question would be, and I'm not really clear on this, but would it make sense for him, for this particular person to file a disclosure?
That is part of
form
it, yes.
Versus, or I guess because he's a paid employee, that's where we're getting into the special municipal employee. Because I know I had some concern, you know, I had a similar situation being on the Board of Health. You know, I'm the unit president of the Legion Auxiliary, but, you know, I don't technically, I guess, get paid for that position.
Right.
So I can fill out a disclosure form with the town clerk, and I can still
Right.
approve food permits, et cetera, for that.
Yeah, there is a disclosure
long as
form that he would have to sign, or anyone in that situation has to fill out.
So on top of that, he also, you also need to take this action?
Needs to be the designation,
Okay,
correct.
just clarifying for
Sure.
myself, so, thank you.
Sure.
Madam
Anyone
Chair?
Make a motion? Mrs. Lapointe?
I move that the board vote to designate members of the Board of Health and Conservation Commission as a special municipal employee in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 268A, Section 1N.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No?
Chair votes aye.
No.
I voted aye.
You did, okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry. It does pass 3-2. Town managers report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the financial side of things, we are in the process of certifying our free cash. I'll keep you all posted. I reviewed the special town meeting warrant with the chair of the Finance Committee, and we'll be presenting that at the hearing tomorrow evening. And we are, believe it or not, a quarter of the way through fiscal year '23.
Wow.
And to date, spending is largely on target. There are some minor exceptions due to some turnover we have in personnel. We're working to try to eat as much of that within budget as we can, but I'm sure by the end of the year, we're gonna have to do a little shifting there, but nothing crazy. On the personnel side of things, it's been very busy. We would like to welcome Mary Calandrella as our new executive assistant to the town manager. Mary is coming from a similar role in the town of Ashburnham and brings decades of municipal experience. She's going to be overlapping with Mrs. Daigle through the end of the calendar year so that Linda can impart her wisdom. So it'll be good. Congratulations, Linda.
Good.
Lynn Gagnon, we would like to welcome her as our collector clerk. She is a Winchendon resident, and she has a pretty diverse professional background that will fit nicely with the skill set needed in that specific role.
And just to clarify, she is replacing Kelly, who is retiring.
Yep, Mrs. Wood, who is retiring on the 30th. So pop by and say thank you.
Yes.
Lori Tarducci as our assistant treasurer collector. Lori has a decade of banking experience and has a strong customer service background. I think she'll fit in very well in that role. Separately, we've been holding interviews for the town manager administrative assistant role, and we're hoping to have somebody on by late October. And we have posted for the town accountant position with interviews expected to kick off the week of October 10th. And we would like to have one member of the Board of Selectmen and one member of the Finance Committee join us for those interviews. If any of you would like to volunteer, maybe communicate that to the chair, and then you can just let me know. And we are still assessing the needs in the Planning and Development Office. People ask me about that one pretty frequently. We haven't forgotten about it. I check in pretty regularly with Nicole and Tiffany. They're doing a really good job down there. I've checked in with the chair of the planning board. He agrees. He's comfortable with where we're at right now. I don't want to leave it vacant indefinitely. I'm just trying to kind of feel out what their abilities are, and then whatever needs we might have, we can kind of craft potentially a new position to backfill. I don't think a one-for-one replacement of what we lost there is right for us at this time. So we're still feeling that out. Okay, you okay, Tina?
It didn't break, did it?
All right. On the project side of things, the Winchton Community Park Amphitheater is on time and on budget with substantial completion expected before the winter. They were pouring the stage today. I have a meeting set up this week with the OPM and architect for the Old Murdoch project to map out a timeline moving forward over the next couple of years. The temporary shoring is going to be fixed before winter, and then we'll focus on the design. The library project is presently on hold until funding approval at the special town meeting in October, and the low bidder has agreed to a request from my office to hold their price until the vote, so thank you to them. And I'm working to secure additional funding for Summer Drive project. So as you may recall, we got some remediation funds for mass development. I'm trying to get roughly 200,000 more that will help Bullspit get off the ground and kind of further incentivize them to move forward. And then just for miscellaneous, I attended the 2022 ICMA conference in Columbus, Ohio. We talked about diversity and inclusion, rebuilding downtowns, and providing support for first responders, among other things. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank the town of Winchendon for continuing to invest in my professional development. I genuinely appreciate it. It's very meaningful, so thank you. That is it.
Thank you. Questions, comments on
Madam
the town
Chair?
manager report? Mr. Ward.
Yeah, just one question, and this is to put to bed a question that pops up on social media and did again over the weekend. And I've already talked to the DPW head. Could you just please tell the public which side of Central Street is going to be closed for parking next year, and which sides or sides will have bike lanes?
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, the Clark side will not have parking, and both sides will have bike lanes.
Okay, so parking will be on the post office side.
Correct.
Okay.
Very important. All right, we have two sets of minutes before us this evening. The first is the minutes of regular meeting on Monday, August 15th. Mrs. Daigle, thank you for forwarding those in advance.
You're welcome.
Those had to be the longest meetings I've ever read.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Obviously, this is an ongoing discussion, the best way to handle these. Changes, whatever, or motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward.
I move the board approve the Board of Selectmen minutes, regular meeting minutes for Monday, August 15, 2022, as presented.
Do I have a second?
Seconded. Sorry.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And then we have the set of minutes from our Monday, September 12th, 2022, executive session, and this is for approval only.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward.
I move the board approve the Board of Selectmen executive session minutes for approval only from Monday, September 12, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Just a reminder, we have a meeting week from tonight for voting on recommendations on the special town meeting warrant articles. That's for Amy. We are not meeting the following week, and then we have, are we meeting at 6:30 on the 24th? We typically have a meeting scheduled just at 6:30 before town meetings to go over anything that comes up.
We don't have a need just yet, but we might, so we'll let you know.
Okay, so the board will be meeting at 6:30 on the night of the 24th, right before town meeting. Anything further? If there's none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned at 9:40. Thank you very much, everyone.